Becky, do you know why mine keeps saying meeting host?
Hi.
Hi. Do you know why mine keeps saying meeting host? And then when it does that, I don't have a place up here to change it.
Meeting. Oh, let me see if I can change yours. Yeah, I can change yours.
Okay, great. We'll figure it out why at some point.
I think it's left over from, I don't know.
Okay, that's fine. It just happens all the time. So I'm at the select board meeting. It says, I am the meeting host. True. Somehow during yesterday's meeting, something changed and I was able to go up in my corner and retype it, but I have no idea.
Well, if you click, I think it's where the camera is.
Okay.
Check it out. Click on that camera and see what it offers, what you can do there. Where
says I can do integrated webcam, choose virtual background, or choose video filter or video settings. Maybe it's video settings.
No, that's not right. See, mine has make host, make co-host, rename. It does it turn blue and say more?
No, under the bluest, the thing that was blue was video settings. Share screen, background recording, statistics, shortcuts, integrated webcam, and touch up my appearance. There's a good idea. Always.
Oh, sorry. Uh-oh. Can you unmute? I muted you by mistake.
Yeah, I unmuted.
Sorry.
And you lost your video camera.
On
purpose?
Yeah.
Okay.
I stopped recording till people get here so that they don't hear us fumble about.
Yeah, I guess that's a good idea.
Yeah.
And then when Jim and I worked together on the draft, he came to my house since we're both fully vaccinated and we had the Zoom link open and nobody came. But it does definitely make for a more informal setting. So I might think about that again.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So I'm going to put the video on.
Video on. Audio on. Recording on. Hey, yeah.
Hi, Bob. Hi, Jim. Hi, Jim.
Good afternoon or good evening, Becky.
How are you?
So far, so good.
You've moved into a different corner.
Oh, are you still in Vermont? No.
No, I'm in Shutesbury,
Nice.
but I've got these different spots around my kitchen table,
Oh, yeah.
and I was sitting most of this afternoon getting ready for this, and I was there's a window behind me, or was behind me, then, which is a problem now because I'm in shadows.
Mhm.
So I had to move into the corner so I can be seen
That's good.
until it gets dark, and then we have to go to Plan B. How you doing, Bob? And Jim? And Melody?
Melody.
There we
Doing
go.
well. Unmuted. Unmuted.
I saw a T-shirt in the store says, "You're muted." Like a cultural change.
Yes. Let's see, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm missing George and AJ.
Yeah.
Maybe just give them another minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is 6:01.
What do you think, Becky? Should we get going? You want us to get going?
No. I meant 6:01 is,
The only other thing is they might have forgotten it's not at 7.
Possible, yeah.
So let's see, did AJ
Definitely
know
last
that in his minutes? Great. Okay.
let's see, which one?
Oh, it wasn't mentioned in his minutes.
I think I have I'll text him.
Oh, AJ's coming in now. Oh, we
Oh,
have
yeah.
them.
Yeah.
They're on now.
Everybody's here.
Everybody's here. Okay, why don't we call a meeting to order?
Good idea.
All right. Good evening, all.
Hi.
Do we want to start with minutes from our last meeting?
Sure.
That AJ sent out earlier today.
Yeah, I had an item, number 3, the second bullet. The 1.1 million, that's after the grant for the culvert, right? I believe it is.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
it
I
must
was just
be.
wondering if
And
we
it
should-
only, yes, it
So
has to be. So maybe that should be specified?
I'm just thinking, yeah, a little caveat, or
Yeah.
because the two combined is really more like 1.4, but it is 1.1 after the grant of 350.
Yeah, the capital requirement. It says capital requirement, which,
I know, and I thought of that too, Jim. I understand that. Just when you look farther down, it won't necessarily sync up, even though that's true. I just thought that it might be worth putting in brackets on behind the culvert after the grant, after grant.
looks like AJ might not have heard that. Looks like. AJ, did you hear George's?
Sorry, I didn't. I did not. My computer's doing all kinds of weird stuff. So sorry, I'm late getting on. I didn't hear George.
No, what I was just saying, AJ, was the 1.1 million. That's after the grant for the culvert is included. So I was wondering if maybe
I
behind
see.
the word culvert, we put brackets after grant or something like that,
Yeah.
It's not, I don't think it's real important. It didn't sync up with what's farther down in bullet 4,
Okay.
I believe it was.
All right.
Well, actually, it might sync up with bullet 4.
All right. I can't even actually open up my document right now, so I'm just going to take a separate notes on it and I'll fix it later.
Yeah, it's a minor thing. I mean, if people disagree. And then number 4, the third bullet, it says 1.2 million. But if you add up the 4 items below it, they add up to 2.15.
Yeah, it's item number 4. It says 700,000. That should be 500,000, right? The school roof part 2 should only be 500,000.
Right.
Well, I think it was a range. I mean, I think,
Yeah, 600,000.
yeah, I think it was a range when we talked about it. We didn't really know what it was. I mean, the 700 I was okay with because it's like the high end of the range.
Should I put the 700 in there and put it in as a range?
That makes sense.
Okay.
But more importantly, yeah, approximately 1.2. I think we should say approximately 2.2 million or over 2 million, something like that. Only so that the 4 numbers add up.
Yeah.
And that's all I have.
But the way he's got in each of the following 2 fiscal years, so that does add up to 2 point.
That was my chin, was to say, across those prods, it was, I think.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
1.2 per year.
AJ, is everybody else getting bad sound from AJ besides me?
Yes.
Yeah, again, my computer's the kinds of weird stuff. I'm gonna just
Sound like Louis Armstrong in the latter days.
What a beautiful
Can I make a
world.
couple of comments just on the minutes here?
Yeah.
One of
Just
them
bear
are,
for 1 second, Bob.
Sure.
While I-
Clear it up.
Can you hear me okay?
Nope.
Yeah, I guess my suggestions weren't necessary.
Can you guys hear me?
yes,
Yes.
clear.
I'm ready for your,
Yeah, I just one thing on one of the bullet points on the culvert issue that we went
Yeah.
through various interpretations or whatever. We ended up with, I think, borrowing up to $500,000. We're going to allocate $250,000 from reserves and then borrow up to $500,000, depending on the cost. So I think that it's kind of backwards the way, at least by my recollection.
okay, so,
It's 350,000, not 250,000.
No.
all right, so hold on 1 second. So I assume you're referring to the actual motion in the notes. And so we had allocating up to $400,000 of capital stabilization funds for the culvert project with the remaining $350K to be borrowed. Then George amended that to allocating $250,000 of capital stabilization funds with the remaining $500K to be borrowed. So Bob, what is your?
Well, I think that, first of all, is that what passed? What we passed was that 255?
Yeah,
That's what I have in my notes.
that's what we
Bob.
vote. That's what
Okay,
we voted on.
I'm not questioning that. What I'm questioning is whether we should be drawing down our cash, our stabilization funds and then borrowing the rest versus borrowing 500 and then drawing down our funds for the rest. It seems like that's backwards.
But for purposes of the minutes,
750 or what it's going to be, but we're going to dedicate 250 from our reserves, and then we're going to borrow the rest of the amount. It might be, God knows, it might be more, but that's what I thought we had agreed. We would transfer a certain amount from the reserve and borrow the remainder.
Right. So Bob, your point is that if the total bill comes to under 750K,
We borrow less.
we would be borrowing less than 500 because
That's what I thought we had agreed. What I thought would be more sensible, actually,
yeah, I don't.
because we don't really know the.
I don't think that was part of our discussion, was it?
No.
Well, it does say we're going to allocate up to 250 and borrow 500. That was a specific number for 500, but an up to for 250. I'm just asking
Well,
you to reverse that.
I'm wondering if we should just say allocate 250, because that's the hard and true number for the
Right.
capital stabilization.
That's what I was suggesting, George.
Yeah, just drop the up to.
Okay, so that would, I think we should probably just do like a quick vote here, maybe just to make sure everybody's on the same page about that then, before I
Well,
change
we
that.
all- I think we all agreed what we were going to allocate 250 of capital stabilization. So I don't know that we need to vote on removing the up
Okay.
to unless somebody else objects.
Right, so the note in the minutes would read to allocate 250K of capital stabilization funds, and we'll just remove the up to.
Yes. And then when it comes time to borrow, we're going to borrow whatever needs to be borrowed. That number is not necessarily hard and fast like the 250 is.
Right,
That was all I had.
okay, so Bob, if we just get rid of that up to, you're
I would put the up
satisfied
to,
with that,
I
Jim?
would put the up to in the 500K part, but that's neither here nor there. But we don't know the bottom line, so
Right.
up to 500K to borrow.
Yeah, I mean, all these capital expenses are all estimates.
Right.
Are we done with that one?
I'm done.
Yeah, I had one on item 2, section 2, item 2, section 2. And this is the paragraph regarding abutters
Right,
to parcels.
Yep.
The last sentence there, it says the planning board is
oh,
$5,000 to cover the cost.
yeah, sorry, it should read the planning board is requesting $5,000 to cover the
No,
cost.
is requesting, but also I think it's only 1,500 and not 5,000.
Oh, right. Well, it's in that sentence. Oh,
There's another
You're right,
there
you're
is
right.
5,000 in advertising fees.
right,
Right.
right.
So they also requested that.
Oh, okay, so I think I was confused there. So
Yeah.
it was $5,000 for the advertising fees, because he spelled that out very clearly.
Yeah, and that's in that bullet, that's in
Right.
section 2, paragraph 1.
Right,
You've got that, and
Okay,
that
so
looks
then-
okay to me.
and then it's $1,500 for the reimbursement.
Yeah, my understanding is it's $500 a piece for maybe 3 different appraisals.
My notes
Which-
read a little different.
Hmm?
So he asked for the $5,000 for the legal requirement. And then in my notes, and I may be wrong, but I had here a recusal relief for the board members at 1,000. And then I had required annual budget of 1,500, their usual budget of 1,500. That's what you're saying, Jim, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the motion, everything regarding the motion is accurate.
Right, it's, yeah.
Yeah.
But my notes, the notes had suggested that they needed $5,000 for the
Legal.
reimbursement expense, and that obviously the math wouldn't add up there. So that would be $1,500, and then that's an additional $1,000 is just their usual budget. Is that their typical expenses?
Yeah, they do, their budget, at least in the last year or so, is what, $1,000 or 1,500?
Okay,
Right, but this second paragraph, abutters to parcels.
Yep.
With special permits, they'll require a real estate agent to do a certification.
Mhm.
And those certifications are, I think he said we're gonna add up to $1,000.
okay,
The 5,000 plus the 1,000 would be 6,000 plus his 1,500 for all over expenses.
okay.
So, right, so I think this last sentence, the planning board is requesting $1,000 to cover the cost of reimbursing members for this expense, is what I have in my notes.
Is that, the other, is that?
Just for your information, out of the budget, this year's request was $2,000. I don't know how that fits into all these other numbers.
Yeah.
That request was 2,000 before the meeting with Deacon.
Right.
Yeah,
So-
and that's accurately reflected in the motion.
Okay,
Yes,
It talks about 2,000, and what Deacon asked for was an additional 5,500.
okay.
So if it's okay with everything, well, I'm just gonna change the amount in that sentence to the planning board is requesting $1,000 to cover the cost of reimbursing members for this expense.
Yes.
Does that work? Okay.
That works.
Yeah, it's a tricky high, Jay.
Yeah.
Susie,
I have an edit I want to request. Maybe it wasn't very clear, but in that last meeting, I was advocating, so I'll read the sentence.
Yeah.
And I sent this to AJ so he doesn't have to come from cold.
Yeah.
Susie advocated adhering to the fiscal policies voted in by the select board in 2018. Relative to the general fund revenues, the town should strive for 10% or greater in free cash reserves, 5% or greater in stabilization, and a debt ratio of 5 to 10%. That was something I said in the meeting, and I would like to include in the minutes.
So Susie, if folks are comfortable, I would take that, I would put that bullet in under section 4, because I think that was the context of that comment, just above the motions, like the bullet before the motions.
Sure. Yeah. That'd be a good place for it.
Okay. Anyone else have anything?
I'm good.
somebody want to
Make a
make a
motion, we approve
motion?
the minutes as amended.
I'll second. Take a vote.
Arvanitis, aye.
Chartier, aye.
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, aye.
Closure, aye.
Walt and I.
Okay, check.
All right. Next item, fiscal year 22 capital plan update. I think during our last meeting, there was some thought that maybe we would have clarity on which way the school HVAC would go as far as funding. Bob,
Yeah, I just want to, I don't know what we thought, but I know that I knew that Becky was not going to get the information until, well, maybe today or tomorrow. She'd have to say that. But with the capital planning meeting is not until Monday.
Correct.
So we won't have any consideration of that before the committee. Before that time, it's Monday at 6, I believe. But Becky was waiting for the state to clarify what the protocols are going to be for this this kind of aid. And we are still assembling. Becky and myself are contacting engineers and other people to try to arrange for spec documents for this contract procurement process. But we really don't, I don't know, Becky may know more than this, but capital planning hasn't really considered this yet, won't until Monday.
yeah, Becky,
You're on mute, Becky. You're on mute.
Sorry. So the first workshop I went to was this afternoon at 4 o'clock, and it was put on by the National League of Cities, but sponsored by the MMA. So the state has not yet come out with guidance. This is going to be handled. These grants, the American Rescue, is going to be handled by the U.S. Treasury Department. And they have put out a 152-page document that was reviewed in general terms. They have not yet written up guidance documents to really clarify all the parts of it. And right now, the hopeful piece that I read that was reviewed was that if infrastructure relates to prevention of COVID, and they referenced air conditioning as an example or ventilation, they said that would be covered by these funds. So I don't know to what extent. They also mentioned that the numbers we received early on that came out of the legislature documents, a number of cities and towns, that those numbers have changed. And I have not yet found whether ours have changed dramatically or not. I'm in search for those documents from the Treasury to see if they give us an understanding. They changed the formula and they had different cutoffs for 50,000 cities less than 50,000. So that's kind of a question mark we have to solve, but I think what is in the end, I believe we will be able to use some of those funds for the heating, but I think it'll be dependent, how much ventilation is involved in the project. I'm not sure if it's only the heating system, whether it'll be covered or not, but I'm hopeful. I think Bob's raising his hand.
Just one thing we have to try to remember, Becky, is getting a bid for a whole building ventilation system too. I'm sure that is going to be right in there with the specifications and the protocols. And it will be a nice thing for them to pay for. From our point of view.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is a great opportunity for us. I don't know if now's the right time, but I just hope that we can answer the question also. Do we know what other things these American Rescue Funds can be used for that we might have in our town? I don't know if now's the right time or not, Jim, but I hope we can address
Yeah,
that.
well, that's a good point, George. We had a separate agenda item just for the American Rescue Plan.
Oh, okay.
But I think Becky was getting into what she knows. She basically was providing that update as part of the response to the HVAC project.
Yeah.
So, my thought is maybe just continue, Becky, if you have further information that maybe addresses what George is bringing up.
Sure. I guess the one area that, as I said before, was always very clear, they are providing funds for water systems and sewer and broadband. The water, we have a serious issue at Town Hall, which really does require a new well to be dug in the behind Town Hall. Our current well is in front of the building and has high levels of sodium, which make it's not a large health risk, but it's a health risk for people that have a heart condition. And it's also, it doesn't smell good. Well, it doesn't taste good. So
Not potable.
well, it is potable. That's the weird thing. But the guidance, because it has the elevated sodium, the Board of Health is not considering it fully potable. I mean, you can, so conditionally it's potable, but if we could solve that problem, it would make a big difference to how we can operate at Town Hall, and use of the kitchen again would be allowed. So that's another project that could fall under here, and it wouldn't be near the size of the heating system, I don't think. So I just wanted to put it out there. And there's also the pump. I think it's a pump and then a holding tank to the existing well. There's problems with those, not the pump, but the holding tank. And that is a hangover project that really needs to get cleaned up. And we might be able to use that funding to, $1,000 or something to help replace that tank. So I just want you guys to be aware that these are the kind of things that we might be able to solve with this money. that are important.
Susie, then Jim.
We also talked about the town hall upstairs office ventilation, that it's tough to deal with all these little separated rooms, but it might be a time to look and see what that system would really look like. And then I need to go back to my suggestion that we get some hand wash fountains, both in the school and in town hall. It's a way that people are more likely to wash their hands, and all the different germs that are communicated on hands, that would be an improvement, both at school and in the town hall.
And what the school has done in place of that, Susie, is they put in hands-free water supplies where the children can fill up their water bottles, and those were chosen by the school as a priority.
I know, but maybe because we have a new source of money, having been a teacher, the fact that kids don't wash their hands before they go into the cafeteria, I would like the school to think about that. If given the money, could they address that problem?
I think Jim and then George.
Becky, the town hall currently is fed by a drilled well.
Yes,
How deep?
it's maybe 200 feet.
200 feet. And so we would like to drill another one. Hopefully we'll hit better water. Is that the plan? Or
Yeah,
that's what you would like?
Yeah, because the drilled well at the town hall is in the front.
Or
It's
in front of
right-
the building? It's in
Yes.
front? Okay.
Yeah, so
So
it's,
if we went out in the field somewhere, in other words, we might be able to get away from the, okay, I just wondered.
Just,
yeah,
just so-
that was the thinking.
just so
All
you're
right.
aware, the septic system's in the back, so
Yeah,
it's like 100-foot distance between a well and any septic part. And also, and you're aware of this, Becky, I know you're aware of this, because a well can turn out to be quite an expensive thing, but if I'm paying for it, because we have to connect to, you said there's a tank, well, it's a pressure tank, and the pressure tank is adjacent to the main water supply of the building, which is now near the front of the building. And if we were going to get into a new well in the south, we'd have to go well beyond the septic system to get the right clearances, because we don't have much side clearance in that building, as far as I know, in terms of property lines. And then we'd have to dig all the way back to the building and then find a way in to that sort of utility room that's underneath the meeting room there, the front of the building, the part that's underground near the selectmen's room. So that's going to be quite an interesting project to do if we end up doing it. It's going to require some digging and some drilling through concrete and some kind of interesting problems, because we have to get to that point in the building with the water line, and then we're probably going to end up putting a new pump in, a new pressure tank, and
yeah, it
all
works.
the rest of it might need more power to drive the pump if it's a deeper well. You never know what you're going to get when you get we might drill a 500-foot well in the back and hydrofract it, and we might end up with stinky sulfurous water. So there's that too. So, it's just the way it is. You never know what you're going to get till you drill.
Yeah. George, and then Melody.
Yeah, I just want to ask Becky, when you're looking at these, two questions. One, when you're looking at all the options, I'm curious if there are options to help with anybody who had financial needs and were unable to pay their property tax bills during COVID. If we had lost revenue in the town and somebody was in trouble and we might have to take them a tax title, is it possible that the Fed would pick up the tab for them for a short period of time? I don't even know if that situation exists, but it would be good to know.
Yeah, I don't believe it does, but I'd have to talk to Ellen again. Yes, there's their top priority is money flowing to those in need, however you can do it. And it's much more wide open. Like last time working with the state, it took me almost 6 months to get permission to help subsidize low-income parents so that they, with their internet service, which they became required to have. this new document makes that possible straight out of the gate.
Nice.
So, and it allows for helping people with rent and all kinds of stuff. It even has the loss of revenue for a municipality. I don't believe Shutesbury will qualify from the brief look at the calculation. They were talking about like serious loss of revenue. You have to have like at least 10%, I think,
Yeah.
to qualify. And our income overall is, I think we're at 98% instead of 99. So that's
Yeah, okay.
th-
And
that's
then,
part as a windfall to the town that I don't think we qualify for that piece.
and then the other thing, when I was brainstorming, what could work here, I don't think it would, but I'm wondering if we could also use it to beef up our unemployment fund. But I
Sorry,
probably
George, you
would have
said
to be-
beef up? Beef up?
Unemployment fund, our unemployment trust account that we
Okay.
have built up.
Yeah.
I doubt it, but I just something I thought maybe, when Becky's looking through it, see if she could find ways to make these things work.
I think the way they're setting it up is you have to make an argument for your money and show who's it's going to benefit. And as you know, our unemployment fund was barely hit. In
Yeah, so no COVID layoffs.
yeah, and in stark comparison to the state unemployment agency, which is totally overdrawn.
Right.
I mean, they're in desperate need of
Mhm.
that money.
Mhm.
And I don't, we'll look through everything, but I don't think we can really prove it with what we have.
Okay, yeah, those are just some of the things I was brainstorming,
No, that's great ideas. And yeah, their main point is to help those in need, even loans to businesses, but the businesses have to be either low income or they have to fit into categories. And as you know, we don't really have very many businesses in town, but we can talk to those that we do have.
And one other, and you don't have to answer, but just put a bird in your ear. The school lunch program, I know it always runs at a deficit. And I'm wondering if maybe we can shovel some money towards that under helping needy families whose kids rely on the school for a diet.
Well, that's been one of the amazing things about COVID this year. They did do that. The school food director worked all year and sent packets home to a couple dozen families all year long.
And there's been no cost to any of that.
Right, and that was fully funded through COVID money.
Oh, nice, nice.
Yeah. So, and the extra bonus is we didn't lose an extra 20 grand on the program this year, like we normally do. So we have that's why the school is ending up the year with revenue they haven't seen before.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Melody?
Yes, I'm sorry. Those were great, great points. And I kind of wanted to ask a question about the water at Town Hall. And maybe it's granular and you've already looked into this, but I'm just curious, has there been any consideration to a reverse osmosis system? That's only a couple $1,000s, would be a lot cheaper than a well.
I do believe it was discussed early on. It's going back about 4 or 5 years. I'll highlight it again. I'll go through my notes and see where it came out. But we did look at it.
I mean, I can attest myself. I had terrible water in upstate New York where I lived, and that reverse osmosis system, I was able to work with my well and it made everything quite tasty, actually. I used it as a selling point to sell my house.
Yeah. And I know the Dillmans have one and they were able to solve their problems. That was attempted at the Watkin property where we had to replace their whole well on town property behind the fire station. But it didn't work for them. It depends on, what chemicals are that causing the problems. So yeah, we'll definitely, as we look closer at it, I'll make sure we discuss that and figure out if that's going to help.
Well, you can get the water tested by people that set these systems up, and I'm sure they could tell you, whether or not this is viable.
Yeah. Yeah, and we have tested the water. We probably need to do it again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Melody. That's very helpful.
How do we want to leave this American Rescue Plan discussion? There's a lot of ideas that have flown around here, concepts. And it sounds, Becky, from your perspective, you're going to learn more about what can be done or not done with this funding.
You want to just add it to the next agenda for another update?
Yeah, that's my question.
Good to me.
I can do that.
Sure.
Susie,
I think we should be prepared at town meeting to give kind of a perspective on it, because we won't know. It's rolling out and it's going to take time. We're well aware of it, and we have a list of possible ways to utilize that program, but we don't know what the program's allowing.
We should know more by June 10th or 12th.
Yeah.
okay, are we good for that topic, the American Rescue Plan update?
Yeah.
I don't think we really closed capital plan update, but my sense is AJ and Bob, your next meeting is, you say Monday?
Yeah.
So we should maybe move this topic to the agenda for our next meeting,
Sounds good.
capital plan?
Yep.
Okay. Update fiscal year revenue and expense documents. And I think, Becky, you might have sent us an updated version
Yep.
just before our meeting.
And I sent one, and then I sent a second one, and it's the second one you want to look at because I realized I hadn't gotten the planning board request into the first one.
Okay, so the 540 version, should we delete that one?
Yes.
Oh, I printed that one.
Sorry.
Oh,
And it's the 551 version that we should be referencing for this discussion?
Yeah, and there's two, there's the expense side and there's the revenue side. So you need two documents.
Becky,
Okay.
may I ask, so the one we want to look at, the total operating expenses is 6,628,523. 6,628,523. Okay,
Yeah, that's correct.
6. Oh, yeah, 6. Okay, yep.
27,358 higher than last year. Actually, 27,960 higher expenses.
Yep. And the revenue is 27,358 difference, or a gap of $601.
no gap, right?
Right, it's not really a gap. The gap, that's the difference between the differences of the 2 years. So
Oh,
it's
yeah,
really
yeah,
not
yeah.
a gap.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's a
never mind.
difference,
Yeah.
it's a
No
difference
gap.
in the gaps.
No gap. Wow. How do we want to start this? Do we want to start with the revenue side or the expense side?
However Becky wants to present it.
You want to start with the revenue side then?
Sure.
Sure.
Happy to do whatever you guys want. Okay, so should we put it up to do that?
Yeah, that might be the best. Do you want me to put it up, Becky? Or do you have it, you're ready to go?
I made you a co-host in case yeah, I'm kind of working with my document on the side panel, so if you could put it up, that would be great.
All right, I'm going to share my screen. And let's see.
Perfect.
Okay, we don't want that one. Revenues. Okay, there's revenues. Can everybody see that, the revenues?
Yes.
Great. So the big change for this week, we've been having the new.
Yeah, Becky, before you get too far into this, if I'm sharing, I can't see people's hands raised, so if someone else could monitor.
Okay, I'll try.
So that,
Maybe people should just speak up.
Yes.
okay,
Okay, so we're looking at proposed FY '22, the third column in from the right side. The line that changed, Kevin is setting new growth at $10,000. I think a lot of that is that he was very aggressive last year in what was available. And so this year, it's all made up of decks and foundations. I'm not sure if there's an actual house. I think there might be part of a house in there. So that's our new growth estimate at this point in time. Then we go down the other big change. Well, just to describe, we have the debt excluded amount for the regional capital plan is 31,638.
Which line are you on?
Yeah, down lower. Yep.
Line 14.
14, okay.
And
yeah.
then the total on line 16. And then we have our maximum allowed levy.
Mhm.
And at 5,832,000, that is way above the $25 per thousand limit. So we are continuing on by adjusting the excess levy capacity on line 19. So we've increased the usage of the, so when the number gets smaller, that means we're using more of the revenue than the prior year. The prior year it was 532,181, and this year it's 483,782. And that's subtracted out from the allowable levy to create our tax levy for this budget of 5,348,860. And that's the figure you would use to divide into the total town assessed value. That's line 7. So if you divide line 20 into line 7, that tells you what the tax rate is for this year. And then I think you multiply by 1,000.
Do you know what that is, Becky? The tax rate?
I think it's 2388. It's 88 or 89.
Okay. I'll go call it 89.
And how does
Alright.
that compare to the last year?
Last year was 20.
260.
2261?
Oh, you know what? I'm totally off. Give me 1 second.
It was 2261 last year. Does that sound right?
Yeah. Yes.
1 second. Let me just, this is the spreadsheet I wanted to be looking at. Okay, so the difference is the 88 cents. So the new tax rate at the would be $23.50. So it's an increase of 89 cents over last year.
Got it. 20, you said 23, what? 850?
50. It was 2261 in FY '21, and this year it's potentially, if it stays at this rate, will be 2350.
Yeah,
And-
Becky, what's the likelihood that the current town assessed value at 227 million, what's the likelihood that'll stay where it is right now versus?
I think, Kevin, the real estate properties, the housing properties, he doesn't have that valuation adjustment, and he believes that's going to increase, but we don't know by how much. So I believe that the tax rate will fall if the 227 million of total town assessed value increases, maybe it'll increase by 5 million, maybe even 10 million. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe I should ask a little bit different question. Maybe the question would be, is this likely to change before town meeting?
It's possible. I think she gave us, she gave him a deadline of the beginning of June. So, but that could be the first half of June and it could happen right after.
In terms of preparing, we never will have something set in stone. So I think that it's okay to go with this. What I am noticing is the difference between what we settled, what we thought was going on for town meeting approved in FY '21, and then we look at the recap, that's about 2.5 million more.
Yep.
So, that might not be significant in the long run. But it will change because that's the nature of setting a mark down on June 12th and saying, here's our best estimate.
And how is line 19 calculated? Where does that come from?
The excess levy capacity is basically a pot of money that we've been holding back that we haven't had to use in the budget. And for many years, we didn't have any excess levy capacity. But as we got closer, as we were able to keep the tax rate lower and as we got closer to the $25 per thousand, it became a necessity. Because we are not allowed to levy at 2501.
Okay, thank you.
So it's so it becomes a numbers game. Keep it
So
below
just-
the $25 per thousand.
Hello? I don't know if you can see me, Chairman. I'd just like to make just my interpretation of what the excess levy capacity is it, we have a Proposition 2.5 law, which I'm sure you're aware of, Melody, which says that you can only increase the levy by 2.5% per year. So according to the lawyers down at the Department of Revenue, if you don't increase the levy in a given year, say you do it by 1.5 versus 2.5%, then you're banking 1% levy capacity that you can use in future years, even in excess of 2.5%, because you didn't do it that year. It seems like a rather dubious, rabbinical, or lawyerly thing to me. I don't really like it at all. But that's what's being used here, is using years where we didn't, there's no law that you have to raise taxes every year 2.5%. But this actually makes it so that the town governments can raise taxes higher than the law, the general understanding of the law, by using this excess levy capacity, which represents years when you did not raise 2.5%. That's what it really is. Is that right, George?
Yeah, that's the way I interpret it. If we're allowed to go up 2.5% per year, and to the extent that we don't, that gets accumulated in this excess levy capacity. And yeah, I guess, Becky, we are able to go beyond 2.5 in any given year, right? Increase
That's what we're doing.
because we can tap this. That's my understanding as well. Whether it's
But we're-
dubious or not,
Well,
that's just the law.
yeah. Yeah, I know Bob doesn't like it, but it's state law, and the intent of the 2.5 is that towns do utilize the 2.5 every year to be able to keep up with their responsibilities. And that's the basic concept. And Bob, you said that we're using it now to go over 2.5?
We're reducing the levy below what we have on this document. Is showing the maximum allowed levy, which would have been too high according to the logic of 2.5, but we're deducting a portion of our excess levy capacity from that number to get it down in line. So it actually changes the formula. It changes not the formula, but it changes the math. So it is not a pot of money. Just to correct you again, Becky, it's actually a capacity to raise taxes.
With a majority vote.
Banked by not raising taxes by the full amount in prior years. And whether I disagree with it or not, which I do, that's what it is, a capacity to work around 2.5.
But it is an established figure. It's a certain amount that's certified by the state. So
Yep.
it's not
Yeah.
that we're just making this up.
Oh, I didn't say that. You're not making it up.
You're right.
It's the
It's
DOR.
You could almost look at it the other way around, couldn't you? If we end up with budgets that are under 2.5, it allows municipalities to more motivation to go underneath 2.5, as knowing that maybe in the future that might be needed. So to me, it looks like it can dampen out the year-to-year budget volatility.
Jim, can you make it bigger? You did something to the screen and it's smaller and more blurry.
Yeah, I did just so I could see everybody, so I could see people's hands, but yeah, let me change it back.
And before we leave this section, I did want to ask a question.
Yeah, go ahead, George.
So, two questions. Becky, row 9, in the proposed FY column, it says 102.7%. The most can be 102.5. I mean, I know it's small, but am I right? That should never be more than 102.5
Right.
for the levy ceiling.
Right.
And to Bob's point, this levy ceiling number is kind of the thing that keeps us from using all our excess levy capacity, I believe is a correct statement as well. So even though, so that's one thing that will keep us from using the excess levy capacity is we can only go up to 5.6 million. We can't go up to 5.8 million. So of the 483, approximately 200,000, I know I'm throwing numbers out, but approximately only 283 of it we can really use and go up if we so chose at a town meeting, because we couldn't go the full 483 because that would put us over the 5,649,000 on line 8. You don't have to do the math, but the point is we can't use all of line 19, even if we wanted to, because then we'd be bumping up to the revenue collection amount that's on row 8, and that's the most we can go.
Right.
And the reason I bring this up is because, are we prepared? Will we have to explain these things on town floor? Do we want to, if nobody asks, do we want to tell people that we are approaching? I mean, I guess we have a $300,000 buffer between what we're requesting on line 23 and our levy ceiling. I suppose we don't really need to address it, right?
I think we should address it in general terms, at least, George.
I think it's impossible to explain it in any detail to town meeting. How many of these meetings have I been coming to, and I still feel like I don't really understand?
Believe me, got to relearn it every time, AJ. So I suppose to Bob's, so maybe all we really need to do is explain to people what the levy ceiling is, and tell them the levy ceiling is 5.6, and that's the most 4,9,760, and that's the most that we could collect in our levy. And then when we get to line 23, as you can see, we're $300,000 below what that ceiling would be.
Right.
That's probably the best, because
Yeah.
we can explain the ceiling. It's 2.5% of the assessed values in the town.
Right.
Yeah, that's a key point, George. The reason that we're hitting the levy ceiling is because the town's value hasn't been increasing.
Yeah, there's a lot we could talk about under that for sure.
Yeah, but that's really what this comes down to. The reason we're hitting the levy ceiling is all about town value not going up.
Well, right, but what we're requesting, correct me if I'm wrong, but what we're requesting is not, we're not hitting the levy ceiling. We're requesting an amount to fund the budget that's 300,000, 340,000 below the levy ceiling. Row 23 versus the
No,
levy.
no, George, it's row 20. You have to, the anchor is the tax
Okay.
money on line.
Okay, so then it's a straight 300,000 less. Okay, but my point is, then that's what we would have to tell people. So we would tell people we're requesting 4,348,000, which is 300 less than our levy ceiling. And oh, by the way, we could tap into that 300,000 with a majority vote in the future. That portion of the excess levy capacity, and then we can watch everybody's eyes glaze over.
Right. But George, we can also say that it's up to them to decide what the budget is. and whether we raise the levy or not, because that's what town meeting's for.
Well, yeah, no, well, that's what we say when we present
Yeah.
budgets and to be approved in the future. Yeah, yeah, of course. And
Yeah.
we as a finance committee, I've been meeting, we've all been meeting all year long. Nobody's ever suggested that we do such a thing. We have no intention of doing such a thing. Nothing I've heard, so that's why I would just say it's there. Mike Vinsky's asked it in the past. I know Mike's asked and we've explained it. So I just want us to be sure that we're prepared to answer that question.
Okay, Susan,
And-
Susie's had her hand up.
One thing is that Jim and I are drafting the annual town report from the FinCom, and we talked about what level of detail to go into, and we're looking at the past efforts. On town meeting floor, I think it's a different ball of wax than what we want to archive in the annual town report. And I think we need to work on our presentation a little while later, but right now we're not going to change Prop 2.5. We're not going to change the compromise deal that was arranged back then that allows us to do 2.5. What people on town meeting floor will want to know is what the spending budget is for and what kind of impact on their taxes it is. And we can say, overall, we're managing this budget so that we don't go, that we don't reach the limit of 25 per thousand. So I think we have some planning to do about our spoken part. We're working on the report that has a lot more detail than probably people at town meeting really want. And again, it's about what policies and ways we're spending the money that and understanding the department requests to keep this town moving in the right direction.
Susie, that report is going to be our sort of outline for the budget presentation as well, right? That we do.
It
before
does
town meeting?
somewhat, but it really, we looked at it, there's some deep in the weeds part, and
Okay.
but we feel like some of that really has to be archived in the town reports, because that's a history piece. But yeah, we have some highlights, but some stuff does not need to be highlighted because it just glazes over people's. And even if there's a few people that want to know, the group of people that are there for the meeting really need these essential items, like what the tax rate did, how much the budget went up, and then they go through the categories and flag what they're concerned about.
I do have one other question.
Okay.
Row 25, Becky, could you remind me what that is? New tax revenue?
That's basically just taking the difference on the line 23 between proposed FY22 and I think the actual.
Oh, got it. Yeah, I was doing the 5109 and the 5308, but it's the 5,017,000. Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Now I see.
Okay, do you want to scroll down, Jim? I guess,
Can everybody see this okay?
Yes.
okay, so there's a second sheet that should be, there
You
you
want to go through this cherry sheet, or there's no changes?
There are, I don't believe that's why I was double checking. I did put in the house numbers and there were very few changes at all. I think the biggest change was in the charter and the school choice assessments.
So actually the state aid by the Ways and Means, we went down a little bit because some of the charges were up, or was it the reverse?
The reverse, the charges increased.
So the current overall, the cherry sheet subtotal is about 10,000 under where we ended up in fiscal year 21.
No, it's over. It's 7,000 more than in 21.
Oh,
It's
Okay.
144,000 instead of 137,000 between the school choice lines. School choice and charter sending tuition.
I was looking at the subtotal for for this cherry sheet.
Yeah, row 34.
Yeah, row 34.
We're down 10,000.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that. Okay, the cherry.
And the net means we're down 16, right? On line 41.
Yep.
So
No, but that's including. Okay, so it's saying,
Our deductions are greater in this year than last year by 6,068, which adds to the 10,347 on line 34 to give us a full decrease in state aid of 16,450.
right.
which I think is one of the other facts that the town needs to hear, because we've been saying this for a while, the state support is diminishing.
But the other area to note is our school choice tuition went up dramatically this year from 83,000 to 113,000,
What line are you on?
28.
28.
And then it got dug into by the tuition reimbursement.
Yeah, and then we lost half of it to the charter tuition.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
We lost
Right.
we lost revenue on the charter tuition on line 27.
Right, so the net is that we are down 16,000.
Yep, for all of it, assessments
Yeah.
and charges,
Yeah, so it,
revenue and expenses.
And what's line 31, exempt VBS and elderly?
Those are exemptions for I think it's the blind and the elderly, and we didn't get any this year.
some years the state sends us money, do they need to know, oh, is it one of those late reimbursement processes? The aid comes on later than the actual happening?
Or it's dependent on individuals in the community that qualify for the benefit.
Mm-hmm,
And it might just be we don't have any qualifying parties at this point.
mm-hmm.
Becky, a quick question. The school choice outgoing and coming in, and the charter tuition outgoing coming in, are those based on which school year, like enrollments are those actually based on?
This current year.
So okay, got it. So that reflects 2020.
Is that October of 2020?
It's October of 2020, but the cherry sheet is updated as the legislators come out with their cherry sheet numbers.
Uh-huh.
So they update those. It's not just the October number. They do a spring number as well. So they have changed since the earliest number by the governor.
Okay, so am I right to interpret here that there's no significant change due to the enrollment patterns that might have happened this year because of COVID? Or?
Well, I think there was a significant change that's showing here with the $30,000. That's at least 6 more students on
Okay,
school
got it.
choice coming in.
On line 28?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'd say 6 students is significant.
Yeah, okay, got it.
And line 28 is not part of line 41, is that right?
Right.
Should not be.
It's always confusing that this is the only way we can show it.
Right. Just make a point, may I? That we're counting the school choice outward as part of this budget, and we're not counting the school choice incoming. That's going directly to the school. So it would seem to me, at some point, we have to discuss the school choice issue again down the road to make it. That doesn't seem right. That those two numbers are separated. There should be a balance, maybe that goes over to the school budget, but we're paying out of the regular budget, and then we're losing that revenue stream as part of this calculation here.
We
Right.
have that discussion when we talk about the school budget, and we've had it this year, so let's not.
I'm
open
just
it up.
making a point, Susan.
Huh.
I don't want to have an argument about it now, but I just wanted to say, there it is again, you know?
Another state statute we have to follow in the budget.
Can we look at the estimated receipts? Why did payment in lieu of taxes go up?
I'm sorry?
What was the $27,000 increase on line 44, the pilot money?
I believe it was a reassessment of the state forest land.
At 336,000?
Yeah, see, it's a compilate, that line 44 includes the Amherst pilot and the DC, you know, the state pilot, the DCR pilot.
Did
But that
that
money's coming from the
Does
state.
that include, was there a battery pilot? Was there an
Okay,
uptick?
that's confusing in words because the solar, for solar, we have pilots.
Yeah.
But they do not, the income does not show here. The income flows through the tax revenue.
Oh, right, thank you.
And we did add $10,000 to the annual pilot through the batteries, 10 or 11,000.
Okay, great.
So
Also,
then that
escalate-
336 in the pilot is traditional pilot. It's non-taxable property. But we're receiving a contribution from the owners of that property in lieu of taxes.
Yeah.
State, Amherst are the two main ones, right? Are the two.
Yeah, and then we have Sirius and Tenemos.
Oh, okay, thank you. Right, I forgot about those.
So it's a very different thing, but it's called the same. The same.
Right, that's,
There should be another word,
yes.
another acronym.
Yes, there should be.
And we can't push up any of these numbers, motor vehicle tax or.
Well,
I
at the
guess.
end of the day, the accountant really is in charge of those numbers and you can't go higher than the prior. I
Oh,
mean,
okay. Okay, not just,
and we might be too high. No, on the pilots, you can do that because that's a fact. So for the most part, they're based on the prior year and the accountant, the determination. But as you can tell in the court fines, that shows what was happening this year, that because of COVID, statewide police departments were basically holding back and only stopping the most egregious offenses in speeding, and that would flow into there. Okay, so you want to look at the expense side now?
Okay, anything else on revenue? Any other questions, comments? Okay. Expenses.
So Jim, we had talked earlier, not long meeting ago, about reviewing the expenses by category, the way it would be done at town meeting. We go to the bottom line of a category and make sure we understand where that number is coming from, and then instead of a line by line by line.
Oh, that's the revenue again.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing this, Jim.
No problem. Why is this? Stop sharing? Okay. Okay.
Jim, I don't know if this is the right time for me to bring this up. 'Cause during the course of this year, I did mention that I wanted to bring up to the committee the idea of funding some of the lines in the budget with free cash. Is this the right time to talk about those lines, or is it another time? It's getting close to the end, I know that.
We should probably make a decision about that today, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Maybe we can still go section by section, and then if there's something in a section you think free cash, we can bring it up that way.
Or we can just finish or we finish the expenses and then just talk about, the whole concept. To me, there's two questions in this, Bob. I think to some extent, we all agree that we don't want to throw the whole 220 we took away last year, that we used funded with cash last year, and have it all go back into the budget. So what's the right amount that we would like to hold back for another year? And yeah, like Susie said, we can talk about the lines as we go down those lines, or at the end, we can just figure it out.
Yeah, from my perspective, just, maybe look through the whole expense. Review all of the expense first, see where we end up, and then have that discussion that Bob is proposing. Just the way I would suggest it.
you're the boss. I'll follow that.
Yeah. So do we want to go by section as Susie proposed?
Sure.
And maybe as we go through these sections, Becky, if you could highlight anything that's significantly changed since we've looked at prior versions.
Okay. Okay, so if we're starting in the beginning, I should bring up, you all recall that the select board voted a 0.25 adder to the COLA,
2-0.
0.25%.
Add on, sorry.
On top of the 1.75
Correct. That
to
made,
get
that
to
equals,
2%.
okay, so that should be on each employee other than, and then there were two other employee changes. The town administrator, what was negotiated was a 5% increase of 3,209. And then the treasurer down below, there's the treasurer.
15%.
Yep, this is 3 additional hours, moving him from 22 hours a week to 25. After the analysis showed that he had been averaging closer to 29 hours a week.
Sorry, can you say that one more time? It went from 20
From 22 hours a week to 25.
to 25. Okay, thanks.
Was it 22 and a half?
You're right.
Susan.
I'm sorry. You're right. 22 and a half, AJ. I'm sorry.
Okay, 22 and a half to 25 hours per week.
Yeah. So it's a 2.5 per week hour increase, equaling $3,896.
So in his 15.30% increase, is 2 of that for COLA?
There's no COLA added on top of that. There's not. So on both contracts, on mine, it's a total of 5%. So there's the 2% COLA is not added on top. And the same with his, it's the straight increase from the 22.5 hours to 25 hours, no additional 2% COLA.
So would the COLA come on in a different year? Is it because it's a contract change that the COLA's not rolled into it?
Well, you could, I mean, it could have been requested that way, but it wasn't.
So next year, if there's a COLA, those contracts would get a COLA.
What the select board did is they split a 9% increase into two parts. So it's a 4 on the TA contract, it's a 4% increase in 23 and just straight COLA in 24. So basically the net increase this year is 3% and the net increase, we don't know what it will be next year. But if COLA was 4% next year, it would be whatever, it'd be the same as what I'm already getting. There's no additional added.
Bob,
Yeah, I just want to say, I don't know how George and Melody think about the COLA, how that scenario played out, but my recollection was there was quite a bit of discussion, a special subcommittee set up to develop a formula to address COLA, which is cost of living adjustment. And they came up with a formula which they presented to us. We were not part of the process after the joint meeting of select personnel and finance. But that came back to us after that had been resolved between personnel committee as 1.75 for this year. And then it went to the select board. The select board decided to basically do it, add another quarter point to that. So my question is, the finance committee, are we supporting this? Do we support the select board's decision or not to town meeting? Because we were never really part of that. We're part of, our mandate, our brief is to make recommendations up or down to the town meeting. We represent the taxpayer, the town meeting. So I think we should have a discussion about what the FinCom thinks about that action by the select board.
So Bob,
Before we go into it, could I just further explain the reasoning, the reason they gave for, Melissa gave for bringing it up was that she felt that because of the COVID year, she felt that it was important to acknowledge the employees. And that was supported in a vote by the other two, just so you have the background from the select board meeting.
George,
it still runs outside of the policy that was just approved.
Correct.
And I was, Bob, I was aware of that, and I was going to bring it up at the personnel board meeting tomorrow, and I was going to ask Melissa specifically about that.
I just think that we had a discussion. We agreed that there was going to be some kind of a formula that would address COLA. I thought it was a good stab that the personnel board took. And I think it was basically biased in favor of the employees, the way that I understood it. But that was what we came up with. And then it was basically overlooked by the select board. And I don't personally support that to town meeting. I don't know what the rest of the committee thinks.
What I wanted to finish on that conversation was that there was a provision where if a committee thought that the standard formula should not be followed, that the three committees would convene: PB, Personnel Board, Finance Committee, and Select Board. But that didn't happen. So I was going to ask Melissa about that tomorrow at our meeting. That's what I have to tell you, because I noticed it as well. And if the personnel, I'm curious to hear the reaction of the other personnel board members.
Melody,
Yes, as someone like George who sits on both the FinCom and the Personnel Board, I have to say I'm a little surprised by this. And I feel like as a volunteer, doing what I believe to be my civic duty, like, why did we go through all those meetings to come up with this policy if it's not going to be followed? So I really disagree with that action that they took, and we should have been consulted per the policy. And, I don't normally feel really strongly about things, but I feel like, as a volunteer that gave all my time to this, if you're just going to make decisions by fiat, then what's the point?
yeah, Susie,
I was there at that meeting, and in the discussion, Melissa referenced that there was a caveat in the policy for unusual circumstances, and her proposal was in light of the unusual taxing year that the employees went through for
I
the
don't think,
COVID
Susie,
work.
that anybody is denying that last year and this year have been difficult. But I think to George's point, the policy is that the three boards would come together. We were not consulted. That's the point. I don't think I would argue that this was a hard year for everybody. But I think that if you're going to set up a policy, then you should follow the procedure.
Maybe because it's a new policy, she saw it differently than in its first year.
Well, she was there on the personnel board. She's the one that helped come up with it.
So maybe she has a different perspective or is not well versed in it yet. And
She
because
should be well versed. She helped come up with it. I don't know how you're not well versed when you're at the personnel board and you help come up with it. I mean, she should speak for herself, but this just seems not acceptable.
But there is a step. It sounds like both George and Melody, you have a meeting tomorrow at the personnel board meeting? Tomorrow?
I mean, I don't know. It'll be interesting, like I said, to hear what the rest of the committee members, clearly Melody and myself are on the same page. Be interesting to hear what Peg's reaction is. And again, I would like Melissa to explain it to us why we weren't consulted. Our two committees, the Personnel Board and Finance Committee, weren't consulted. And I'll let her know that there are members of the Finance Committee, and I think Melody's going to articulate it very well. You know, the policy was put in place. The ink didn't even dry, and immediately it was ignored, and that is not acceptable. I'm usually pretty flexible too, and I certainly understand the logic, but how's
And
the
I-
policy?
Before we all get, I probably shouldn't have added it here. I think they understood it had to go to the finance committee for approval. And that was part of the process. So I think there was, I don't think it's as agreed, and it's probably my error for not having the discussion before I added it in. I was just going through stuff. So I apologize for that, and I can back it out so you guys can work with the budget with the figures that you're comfortable with, and then you guys can resolve it with the other folks. But I apologize for that. It should have been a discussion, and I originally had it that way, and I shouldn't have changed it.
But Becky, it sounds like a vote was actually taken by the select board. I mean,
Yeah,
like,
but they
yeah.
don't have final say.
okay,
So it was a policy vote to make the suggestion to the finance committee.
I see.
That's different.
So I apologize for not being clear. Just,
Is there time to convene a meeting between the three boards to talk about this, like the policy dictates?
I don't think so, George. I think we have to
George,
decide whether we're
can-
going to support this or not.
Well, Becky, Becky, to your last comment there, it makes it sound like the select board it made a recommendation,
correct.
but it's not it's up to the finance committee to make a final decision. Is that what you're?
Yeah, they have to come together. They don't have to, you have to come together to work together. And so I shouldn't have added it in. I was looking at all the different numbers and feeling the pressure that I have to have a number in the warrant, and I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah. Bob,
Yeah, I just want to say, if I recall correctly, back when we had our joint meeting, it was proposed that the finance committee just review this when it came out of both personnel and the select board. So the personnel came up with their formula, the select board made their recommendation, I guess we're calling it. It's up to us, the finance committee, to weigh in now. We were told that we were going to weigh in down the road. So we're going to, at some point, have a vote to whether support the recommendations of the personnel board or not, or further to recommend the the increase that the select board has recommended. So that's what we're going to have a vote. You know, maybe we'll have a vote after George and Melody and the personnel board meet, and we can talk. They can talk to us, but we should have a vote whether we recommend this COLA and to what level, and present that to our town meeting. Isn't that right?
Mhm.
Becky, just a couple of questions, just as, to understand the impact on the budget. The 2% COLA, what does that translate out to?
It's in dollars. I'm sorry.
Yeah. in
You're
dollars.
at the 0.25, I think is $1,010.
Yeah. So
And that's what-
$1,000 is from the 0.25.
Yeah,
So 2% is 8 times that.
right.
So about $8,000.
Yep. And it's the numbers are screwy because the police department has a decrease, so they're not getting any of that. So it's a little off. It's a little less than normal, a normal 1% calculation. And I apologize. I've been too many meetings, and when I looked at my notes, I was thinking that I had given that number to you guys, the $1,000 difference, but it must have been somebody asked me to calculate it.
And this isn't about the dollar anyways, although it's good to know what it is.
George, could you speak closer to your?
I'm sorry, no, I was mumbling to myself. I said, yeah, and this is obviously more about, not so much about the $1,000 as it is about the process.
Yeah.
Unnecessary comment.
So is the next step is George and Melody to bring this up at the personnel board, and then we regroup on this topic, or?
If the select board wants it in the budget.
George,
and we're-
can't quite hear you.
Not sure why. If the select board would like us to proceed with this and wants to ask our departments, I guess, as Becky is saying, then we're going to be in a position where we have to make a decision very quickly on it.
Yeah. Susie,
I propose that we go back to the personnel board and approve select board formula of 1.75. And if the select board wants to really stand by a 0.25 increase, that could be a separate item. And that will allow us to move forward on this budget. And if they really want to stick with it, we could consider it before these numbers get printed. But we can start with where we thought we were at, which is 1.75.
so when you say a different item, you talk about a different warrant article?
Yeah, people can suggest things to be, or they can even do it in the budget. I don't know if they can do it during the budget discussion, but I think they could do it as a separate article if they want to.
Melody?
Yeah, and I think we need to get some clarification on what the process is, because as we wrote this process, I was envisioning that if this was going to be outside the normal formula, that there would be a convening of all 3 committees or all 3 boards, and we would kind of talk together. I think talking piecemeal like this, where the select board comes up with their own thing, and then we come up with our own thing, and the personnel board comes up with their own thing, it seems inefficient and not collaborative at all. And it shows a government that's kind of piecemeal, and it doesn't make sense to me. So I feel like we really need to have a clear articulation and understanding between the 3 boards of how this actually works, because I don't think that all of us doing our own separate thing makes sense. Because I thought when I read that we would all come together simultaneously.
That was the intention.
AJ, is your hand up?
Yeah, I think I think all of these are totally valid points, by the way. But I think the alternative to Susie's suggestion is that we include the 2% COLA increase in the budget, and that George and Melody just kind of make a strong statement to the personnel board that, about that in future, years, we've, like there's a policy in place and that wasn't followed closely this year, and just provide the feedback that, this needs to be done better in future years. I don't particularly have a strong feeling about Susie's suggestion or this one, but it seems to me that those are in terms of moving forward, those are our two options.
I'm okay with leaving it at 2%. And yes, and letting them know that the future of FinCom, would not, if we're going to go outside the line, we want you to follow the policy. And I'm sure the personnel board will tell them the same thing tomorrow. Next time we won't be so okay with this. I don't know.
I'm not okay with it this time. I'm sorry. I'm on with Melody about this. I don't think this is the right process. And I think that, frankly, I, like everybody else on this committee, be willing to make some compromises. And I consider 1.75 to be a compromise from what I thought was fair. Because don't forget, it was a tough year for the taxpayer too. And a lot of those people who pay taxes here didn't have full-time jobs that were compensated for. And so I'm considering their interest here. And I think that, but again, I'd be willing to go along with the personnel committee's recommendation, but not this sort of unilateral move by the select board. I don't support that.
Crisis meeting situation, but it's okay.
So I would be willing to have a vote for the FinCom to support the 1.75 that came out of personnel board. Or make a motion that we support that recommendation
Put it somewhere.
right now if the people want to vote on it.
Okay. Bye.
Anybody want to second that motion? Melody, you seconded?
Sorry, second.
No. Any further discussion?
Can you repeat the motion again? Please,
George, could you, or
please repeat the motion.
The motion was to support the 1.75% COLA that came out of your board personnel in town for the budget.
And Becky, the way this went down, I just want to be clear about what you said earlier. The select board wanted to give an additional 1/4%. And their charge to you was to come to us and ask us?
I brought up at the meeting that, it has to go to the finance committee. So they took their vote and I didn't handle it well to bringing it to you guys.
Okay, that's my question.
Susie?
I think the FinCom, I can't remember if we took a vote on the personnel board's method to support that. So I feel like we have done one vote. Bob wants us to vote specifically on 1.75. AJ offered the idea of going with 2 and saying next year we're going to be more clear about the process and stick with it. So is that that's where we're at, right?
Made a motion for 1.75 and it was seconded. So
Right. I'm just making sure I understand what I could vote for.
Well, can I ask a question of clarification also? Bob, in your motion, do you mean 1.75 with consideration for the extra 25.25%?
I don't know. No, I didn't say that. I said that we would support the 1.75.
So that we would just hold it at 1.75?
Right. And then if the select board wants to add an amendment to raise it 0.25% at town meeting, then that would be up to town meeting to support it. But I'm making a motion for the FinCom's recommendation
Yeah.
to town meeting.
I just wanted to be sure I was clear.
And I guess the way I understand is if this motion would have passed, there would still be the opportunity, as I think what Susie talked about earlier, to put in another warrant article for another 0.25% increase, right?
But a warrant article is usually,
George, you're fading.
I don't understand why this is.
There, I can hear you when you're backed up.
Oh, okay. I was just gonna say, a warrant article, what would the warrant article be? Usually a warrant article is to fund a specific thing. These are across multiple lines. Is that something that can be accomplished with a warrant article?
It's also, it's not really a COLA increase. It's almost like
Right.
sort of a bonus for, consideration of, this year's challenges or something. I don't know. Yeah. It's a little complicated.
I like that idea though. We could build a bonus line, accountant could put in a bonus line and we could fund the bonus line for $1,010, and then that could be paid out to each employee in July. And we can give them a straight bonus instead of the pay increase.
Oh, out of the FinCom reserve fund?
Or we could create a bonus line, employee bonus. I think we can. The town accountant could just pay everybody out of a single bonus line.
For which fiscal year are you talking?
For next fiscal year, we could change all these salaries to 1.75 and take that $1,000 and put it in a new line called bonuses. And then when the budget's approved in July, the treasurer could pay everybody a bonus of 0.25 of their 2021 salary, fiscal 2021 salary.
Well, don't COLAs up people's baseline salary?
Yes.
And so somehow you see it as not doing that. It would be separate even from that.
Well, because we could execute that here. A warrant article again. Well, and Becky, maybe but for me, we've got dozens, maybe a dozen salary lines, some number of salary lines that we're talking about, and how are we going to address each one in a warrant article?
And we have about a dozen salary lines, but there's about at least 4 of those that handle multiple people within them.
Just a reminder here, please, if I may, we were talking, one of the things we brought up in our discussion at the original meeting was that COLA is an acronym that represents cost of living adjustment. It doesn't represent bonuses for COVID hardship or any of those things. It's COLA. So in that respect, George's idea makes some rational sense in that if you're going to give somebody some extra cash because of the COVID year, that would not mean that you would permanently raise their salary. I mean, it would be for 1 year. Hopefully there'll be no more COVID years after this one. But anyway, I personally, again, think that we were talking about COLA, and then COLA, we came up with the personnel board worked hard and came up with a formula which was supposed to prevent the kind of discussions we're having now and prevent what the select board did. But yet here we are. So let's just go back to what this was all about. A formula to provide a cost of living adjustment to town employees, with the exception of those who have different contractual situations. 1.75, that's what the motion was, 1.75.
So I would want to vote to approve that if there was the additional idea of putting in a bonus line for the $1,010.
We make that as a separate motion?
I guess so. Not amend his, but just go ahead with his and then the next one.
Yeah, the only thing I would say about that is maybe as good as an idea as that sounds. When you break it out by all the employees, we're basically going to be approving about a $70 pay.
Six-pack.
It could almost be insulting to the employees in practice. I understand it was my idea. I maybe didn't think it through at the moment that I thought of it. But I would point that out to everybody. So if we took 1,000 and we had 20 employees, right, the average bonus that we're talking about is pretty small. And I don't want to, the select board's idea, I don't want to backpedal here because I do believe in the principle, and especially the way Melody really described it, I think was really, really well done. But then I heard from Becky that, maybe the ball wasn't handled quite properly. Maybe the transfer was, the situation wasn't handled the way it should have been. I don't necessarily want to start punishing people for that. I do think we need to give a strong message to the select board, but that's why I still think maybe the 2% is okay. In reality, if the select board said, let's talk about 2% because of COVID, and we did have a meeting and the three of us all came together, I probably would have went with it. So that's why, Bob, I'm not really, yeah, it wasn't handled properly, no question about it. Sounds like the intent was to handle it properly because Becky was going to be the medium for the communication and that broke down, but
George, there's also a timing factor. I mean, this policy didn't exist until, a few weeks ago. In future years, we're going to be able to make the calculation that's built into the policy, obviously, much earlier in the budget process. And there would be time for, the three boards to come together if there were special circumstances. And, part of it just feels like, the process didn't play out the way it should, in part because of timing.
good point. I agree with that. I think that's true. I still think that tomorrow Melanie and I should make our point very
Absolutely.
clear.
100% agree. I mean, I think, like I was suggesting earlier, I mean, my recommendation would be to, keep the 2%, but make a clear, strong statement of concern about how this unfolded. But that's just my view.
I think it's a good point.
Susie, I think,
I'm in favor of the option of going to 1.75 and then doing a bonus line. The bonus line is that way it separates it out from the COLA, and the select board gave that nod. They gave the nod that it was a tough year and they wanted to recognize that. And by allowing it to be a bonus line, and it's just for this year, it meets their intent.
We call the vote.
any further discussion? Okay, we can vote.
The motion was to support the 1.75% COLA increase as a formula from personnel.
Every night is day.
What was that, George?
No.
Okay.
Day.
George here, aye.
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, no.
Mosier, aye.
Walton, aye.
So
Motion-
passes 5-2.
Yeah. Susie, do you want to make another motion?
Yes, I would like to make a motion to put a line in this budget called COVID, call it bonus. We'll have to explain it, of 0.25% as suggested by the select board.
I'll second that.
It would have to be a dollar amount, wouldn't it?
What was that, George?
It would have to be a dollar amount. I'll yell. I'll start yelling.
Yeah, we can say 0.25, which is recognizing their words, for value or equaling $1,010.
Susie, I just want to make sure I've got this right. I have Susie Mosier makes a motion to add an employee bonus line amounting to 2.5% based on the select board's recommendation.
Isn't it just 0.25%?
Oh, yeah. What did I say something else? All right, yeah. 0.25%.
Yeah.
25%.
Based on the select board's recommendation, totaling $1,010, if that's the number we really are working with.
Can I ask a question? Do we want to specify that this would be included in their base pay or as a
Bonus.
standalone?
I always thought bonuses were just a one-off. I don't know. I never got one.
Any further discussion? Okay, you can vote.
Overnight side.
George here, aye.
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, aye.
Mosier, aye.
Walton, aye.
If the board doesn't like it, they can always come to us and have a meeting.
Where are we, Becky? Still on the first part of the first page.
Yes.
We can go to the bottom line of general government, which is on page 3. That's how fast we'll go. So these numbers are a little skewed, but the bottom line will be totaled right.
Bottom line of what? Of total government?
Yeah, well, we've just changed the way the COLA is dealt with from what's on these numbers. But the total required amount for the budget would be the same. It's just listed in 2 different ways.
Any other significant changes, Becky, in general government other than what we've talked about?
Not new. Let me just double check. No, the next big changes are in the hauling and trash lines.
What number, Becky?
It's closer to the end.
Well, but I'm instead of only big numbers, I'm hoping that we are all looking at like total general government, understanding it's an increase of 11,773, and we all are familiar with that, and we're ready for that to be what town meeting deals with.
And especially any lines that are significantly different, like the IT support line is 19%. You know, and these reallocations of the heating and telephone, I think we can all address those, right?
Mhm.
At least one of us who's going to be at annual town meeting should be able to answer each of these lines.
Yeah. And
Although Becky does too, you know, I mean, it's not just the finance committee. Becky, I know you are very familiar with.
No, but it's best when you guys can speak to stuff.
Makes us look competent.
Is line 57 correct? I thought that should be 7,500 based on,
Oh my God.
is that,
Uh-oh.
did the Conservation Commission get?
I didn't.
Yeah,
see
it looks
I was
like it.
in a rush.
They're gonna be happy.
Yeah, that certainly looks that way.
Okay,
So what's the correct number for Conservation Commission?
it's 1164.
So it's unchanged basically from last year.
I
I'm
will double check.
what line are you on for conservation?
It's,
56,
I put the- I
56.
gave them the planning board's
Okay,
money.
This actually lowers our expenses. This is good.
Well, I just raised it because I added it back to the planning board.
Yeah, but
You can't.
you're adding, what did you have for conservation? Was it 1164 as a budget?
Yep,
Well, so it does lower the expenses because,
The 2,000 goes up by 5, but the 7,500 goes down by 604.
yeah.
800,
oh, good.
46, 36.
Yeah,
And as soon as I get all the 1.75s, they hit a bunch of lines that are stipended. So once I get those all, I'll resend the budget to you guys. I guess I'll wait till you
yeah,
figure out all the changes.
What about the chief salary line? How is that being handled, Becky?
Yeah, before we get to chief, just make sure we're all done with general government.
yeah, I wanted to ask about the two old town buildings.
I
wanted to ask
can't
about
hear
the
you, George.
Town buildings? Total town buildings, yeah. So it looks like we have quite a number of things going on. Equipment maintenance, electricity. I mean, all these lines are materially different than last year. So I was wondering, Becky, if you could just run down each one real quick. Why is the equipment maintenance $1,500 increase?
Because we run out almost every year. I mean, it's really been tight. And if you see, I think it's last year. It's with the changes in the elevator maintenance, they can spend, we can spend up to $4,000 to $8,000 just on that. I'm sorry, $4,000 to $6,000. So it's to make sure that we have enough money to pay for all the equipment maintenance that comes through the door. The electricity is a shift between the heating, reducing the heating and adding 2,000 more to the electricity and adding more to the, it's the internet account, added that separately, and then reduce the telephone line.
So is this all to align more closely to what our run rates have been, our experience has been?
Yes, because with the new, this is the first year that we've had with a new internet system. And with all the new telephone rates that resulted from there, I was trying to make adjustments that are more realistic.
Okay, good, thank you.
And we've switched out, we've got mini splits in a number of buildings. So our electricity has gone up a little bit and our heating, the oil costs have reduced. As you can see from the last actual at $7,900. And the prior one was over 11,000.
Okay,
Anything else for general government?
no,
I'm gonna ask Becky, and I asked this before, but it seems like our telephone and internet has gone up. Is that because Crocker.net is charging us more than what we were paying before?
No, we've been, those lines will probably reduce the telephone when it's settled. But the internet costs are lower, but our telephone charges are still, we're still sharing with the school. They held on to a number of phones and then we split the costs, and our credit from the school often doesn't come back during the year. It ends up in free cash because of the timing. So I'm just trying to sort it out so it covers what we're actually spending. And we'll probably see another reduction in the phone line next year.
I just would have expected it to go down from when we had the wonderful Verizon, Bob Bell, as our provider,
Well, we already, Town Hall's phone system did not change.
Yeah.
So we already had Crocker's rates did not change with the new internet system, because we already had Crocker.
Oh, you did.
And we already did.
Thank you.
All done with general government? Police?
so in total protection of property and, or whatever that title is, persons and property, we can see a reduction. And we know that that was Dan Fernandez outlining the staffing patterns. And in the heightened culture we're in, people seeing that number reduced might need that, some explanation about the services that we have at the moment.
I think Dan, originally in the prior year, you see there was a big jump in the prior year. Well, it wasn't that big a jump. It went up $4,000. But he had been budgeting for a very well-trained, a sergeant with about 8 or 9 years experience.
Mhm.
And when that sergeant ended up going to UMass and earning twice as much.
Mhm.
So that's why Dan reduced that line, because his anticipation was that when they filled potentially with a sergeant, they wouldn't hire the person he was thinking about at the same level. So it was the $8,700 reduction.
My question was, Becky, that we don't have a chief right now, so we're not paying a chief's salary. And I don't know what the timeline will be for us to I have a contracted full-time chief, but we have a line, we're carrying the chief salary over intact. So please help me understand that.
Okay, so the police study committee working group will be starting. Now that we have Melody finally appointed, I'm sorry I didn't have that in my notes, Melody. And Ralph was all too willing to tell me he had been appointed, so it didn't help. So Bob, to answer your question, where the hope is that through the summer, as this process moves, that potentially, depending on what structure is chosen, if it's chosen that we maintain a police chief, that would happen most likely in early fall, around September potentially. And we have no clue. Right now we have the money that was in the police line at 61,000, $6,000, I guess it was, when 60,000 when he started, was for a person who had never been a chief before. So he was brand new. The other candidate that we had wanted $125,000 a year. So you have a big range. The outgoing chief's salary, as you can see, was $83,000 a year when he left. So I think leaving it at the amount where it is now gives us the ability to hopefully hire someone. I don't know where that, that one's a hard one to gauge. Usually when you try to bring in somebody new, it can be higher, significantly higher than a brand new person who left with no chief experience. So I think it's very reasonable to keep it where it is. But again, that's, you guys can think about that too.
So it's basically guesswork because we don't know.
And it's timing, it's structure, it's, what will if you hire a new chief, how much will he request? So I
There's a
think,
lot of moving parts there right now.
yeah, but I think it's a number that's could be reasonable. It could, but at least it's a starting place. I don't think it's okay to zero it out at this point because we very likely will need it.
Susie,
So when we're preparing a budget, when we don't have solid information, we're preparing it so the town doesn't get whacked with something it didn't see. So we're trying to look, we're anticipating it would be in this ballpark. We don't know how it'll play out. And that's really something that happens all through this budget. So I feel that it helps prepare the town for something that's likely.
AJ,
Yeah, I guess the only thought I have about that is that, sort of best case scenario, we're gonna have a chief for what, like 9 or 10 months of the fiscal year. So even if she or he were hired at the current level, I assume that since it's not, that person would not have been working a full year, that they would not utilize the full amount. But so I don't know, that's the only thought that I was trying to think through in my head. We're considering that number.
George,
Yeah, I'm looking through the wage and tax schedule. I'm sorry, I do this every time. The wage and salary schedule for Franklin County.
Mhm.
Leverett's chief makes 75 grand. I think it was Ashfield was 73 grand. I just lost it. Conway's was over $70,000. Gills was over $70,000. So, if we prorate the year, 65,000 should be okay.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was for everybody's benefits too, not just, and not necessarily in response to your one point, AJ, but
Yeah.
I was just looking through it while we were talking. So I just want everybody to realize that, yeah, Buckland, it's 69,806 is the annual salary. So, there's a very good chance that the annual salary will be higher than 70,000 or, higher than 65,000 for sure. And that's going to be what we need to prorate.
Right. Okay.
Becky, did you have your hand up?
I was also just going to say that for much of this year, the town basic framework for the police department is 3 full-timers plus part-timers. And so since the beginning of March, we have had only 2 full-timers. And we've had, we just are bringing on new part-timers that are starting now. So the current budget, there's leeway in the police wages account. It's going to be underspent. But going into next year, there's been 2 new recent part-time hires that will be working more hours. So we'll be, the new schedule will be closer to full than it was this year in hours and dollars. And what is allowable is for the person who's serving as the officer in charge, if it were necessary, if we don't settle on a chief, that person could be paid out of the chief line. So it gives us some flexibility depending on what happens in the future. Did that make any sense to people?
Mhm. Yep.
It made sense. The only thing that I'd caution you about is this word flexibility always comes up when we want to have reserves and cushion for spending, and that ends up being quite a bit of money. That's why our cash reserves are as high as they are now. In part, at least. So
They were high. They're getting lower, but
Yeah, good. Well, I hope they continue that.
based on our last meeting, we took a big chunk out of there.
Yeah, it's true. Start.
Anything else, police? Fire?
Nope,
Fire and emergency management.
small change.
Want to get into education?
Small change in the elementary transportation. And actually Leverett's went up. Ours went down, but Leverett went up another $20,000.
Transportation?
Yep.
What drives those changes, Becky?
They got really whacked, didn't they?
The number of stops,
I mean, because
the route,
It's the routes and the demographics of the children, and Leverett's numbers are climbing.
when I look
The
at,
graphics are figured into the assessment.
Demographics?
I mean, the demographics, you mean the income level of the parents of the children?
No, I mean where, all the different children, where they're located,
I
where the
see.
kids
so it's
are.
really the miles driven.
Yeah.
So why did we go from 67, I'm sorry, which line? I lost my line here. I took my eye off. From fiscal 20 to fiscal 21, we had a roughly $27,000 increase. What caused that?
A new 5-year contract
Oh.
that Margie McGinnis and I went down and met with Doug for him to review and explain it, because at that year, they also had a large increase, but then they got a second one in a row.
So that big increase that I'm looking at, 27,000, was true for all towns in our region.
No,
Not at that level, but it was a big increase for everybody.
no. It's pretty complicated, but because it's sort of like with the Union 28, where, the assessments, so Amherst and Pelham numbers of students dropped. So Leverett and Shutesbury's percentage increased. And those were the main driving forces, changing in enrollments at both schools and where those students lived. And Shutesbury and Pelham Shutesbury and Leverett already have the longest distance, and mileage is part of the formula. It's a massive spreadsheet with all kinds of components that's been devised to come up with these numbers.
Susie?
and that transportation contract is going to be renegotiated at what year?
Okay, so it was new 2 years ago. It's a 5-year contract.
Becky, this is not a budget related issue, but is there any discussion of another adjustment for FY '21 transportation expenses just due to the COVID impact? No.
Yeah, I had really pushed hard back in December, January to get some
Mhm.
solid answers.
Yeah.
He's, I think he said there'll probably be a similar reductions to last year, which was about $5,000 or $6,000.
Mhm.
I don't know how it all works with they're actually using the buses now.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that helps or hurts us. It didn't seem to help when they weren't using them.
Yeah, but even this year, even though they've been using them for most of the year, it's just not the same number of routes and number of passengers. I mean, there's like, I'm sure you guys have seen, there's a lot of dropping off this year.
Yeah, about
So
50%,
It's just,
it
it's
looks like.
just, I mean, I don't want to get us to get sidetracked, but it's, I have to say, it's still a little bewildering to me how, like for 2 straight years for there to not be more significant discounts given the actual, I understand they have a contract, but they have expenses that must have been significantly reduced.
Yeah, especially when they
years
put,
ago.
when people were unemployed. There seems to be, it's a statewide phenomenon. The superintendents,
Gotcha.
the,
Okay.
DESE has pushed that to be careful that they not bankrupt these companies because there's usually no competition when you go out to negotiate. I believe when I started talking to Bruce about the details of the contract he has with another company, his rates on different things were higher than Amherst has.
Yeah.
And I think he got a bigger, a higher percentage discount, but he was paying more to start with.
Right.
Just
It's,
a small point, Becky, a lot of businesses in the state and around the country have gotten loans from the government that were forgivable because of the lost business and revenue that they sustained due to the COVID. And I can't think of a better candidate than a school bus company to get one of these loans to cover his fixed overheads and so forth. And so that it wouldn't fall on us. I mean, I don't see why that isn't happening, why that hasn't been coordinated by by some of the financial people in the district, because that's a hell of a lot of money that could be coming from another source. I mean, a lot of people are getting these forgivable loans. You know what the program is, that millions of dollars are being given out to businesses that were damaged, whose cash flow was damaged by the COVID,
are you
And
talking about the PPP loans?
Yeah,
Well, they wouldn't qualify because they laid their people off.
really. Even though like restaurants get these loans, they lay their people
Yeah.
off, and their employees are going on unemployment and so forth. But they get the loans to cover their revenue, the major drop in revenue that they sustained. So million, literally hundreds
PPP
of
loans are
thousands.
to pay individuals, to pay your employees. So,
Oh, no, they're operating expenses too, rent, all the rest.
but that's the smaller piece. The main piece is to pay your employees. So if you don't keep your employees on, you don't qualify.
Well, why are they laying off their employees if they're getting most of their contracts? I mean, it's not like they were giving up that much.
I
There-
need to point out the time.
Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry.
And so we're gonna stick to, we can say that things like this are being, people are looking into the details, but here's this budget.
You're right.
Okay,
Thank you.
And I would love to have different answers for you, but
Yeah, I know.
you guys all heard him last year at town meeting. They weren't coming forward.
no,
Okay.
Okay, we're going into the Public Works and I think it's line 129 and line, I'm sorry, 130 and 131. I'm sorry, 130 and 132. Line 130, there was a small change in the third year of the contract I'm sorry, fifth year of the contract. And the sanitary landfill, I reviewed the bills we've been receiving and the tonnage, and it looks like we're gonna need a bit more to make it through this year. We actually had carry forward money last year the budget was 35,000 last year once it was adjusted. So I think that will help make sure we get through. It's hard to tell. The numbers on recycling and trash are different this year. They're increased. So it might
The
be.
landfill fees are up, right?
What?
Landfill tonnage fee is up, isn't it? The
Yeah.
price they pay per ton.
Yeah.
So is that the
And
fee
there's-
is up or the tonnage is up? Or both?
The fees are up.
Okay.
So we're increasing it by 9.8%.
And does that include the recycling aspect of it, Becky?
Yes.
Because that's another issue that was really a dynamic we're losing our ability to recycle. And we were making money at one point or
We
something.
were making money and now we're paying about $45 a ton for our recycling.
And about 75 for trash or something.
It's up to it's over 80.
We're collecting money. We are now actually.
George, you're
Couldn't hear
quiet
you.
again here.
So what you just said, just so I understand this, we used to get money for our recycling. Now we actually pay to, okay.
So this budget reflects that we don't see that changing over this next fiscal year.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's not bad for considering those aspects.
And the recycling folks were saying that there's more in-country recycling being developed. There's a lot of investment into small little firms to help keep the recycled materials and utilize them within our own country instead of shipping them all to China as the practice had been.
Good.
So as that develops, it could benefit. You know, there could be a change in, more of a
We'll be
benefit.
getting trash from China.
Yeah. Dump it on Lotto 32.
Hey,
Okay, moving along.
Okay, there's nothing new. I've gone through the new changes. So anything else you have a question about, please ask. They're not new changes.
Well, we went through a process to come up with veteran benefits. Row 145,
Row 145.
144, excuse me.
Veterans.
Yep. We decided to lower that because we hadn't had any veterans in town. Is that what it was?
Well, the final change, the treasurer wanted to have at least one person, money for at least one vet, even though we haven't had any. But the new change was I got the corrected form that Mike had brought up the issue. Why are you quoting it at $8,000? And the form I had gotten from the vets was an earlier form that had the higher number. It was 7,800 or something. And Mike was given the new form that showed it at $4,700. So we're adjusting from the 8,000 down to the 5,000 for one vet.
Per the county's calculation.
Becky, don't we have a balance in that account? Isn't that an account that we have a standing balance in?
Which one?
Veteran benefits on our expense sheet?
did a rollover?
I don't think so.
I think maybe I found that on the expense report that we've been accumulating a balance in there. I don't.
Oh,
have-
you're talking about the reimbursement that goes into free cash.
That goes into free cash. I thought it was a rollover account. So that's what I wanted to find out, to clarify.
I think so. What happens is when they charge the town, they charge for 100% of the costs that are given out to the veteran. but then the state gives back the town 75%.
I understand that, but we have an allocation in every year's budget for veterans benefits.
Right?
And if we do not spend it, which we have not done in the last couple of years, we don't pay out any benefits, we don't get any reimbursement, but we do accumulate that money in one of those, in an account that's rolled over. Isn't that true?
I don't think so.
I'll have to.
I think we could ask for it to be rolled into the next year's budget, but I don't see that there's not a revolving account, is there?
It's
I don't
not.
think
That's
so.
what I thought. I think it might be. Again, I thought I had printed out that expense report, but I don't have it in front of me. I'll have to look it up here.
Okay, so if you can tell me what page,
I'll look it up.
yeah,
Let's see.
if you'll call me and we can,
Okay, I'll do that for
That's
next time.
okay.
For next time.
that'd be great. Yeah, I'm not seeing it in the fund balances.
Can I ask a question?
Melody,
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just have to know, what is Inspector of Animals?
Okay, I believe it's, okay, there's two things. There's Inspector of the Animals and then there's the one right above it. Can you move that up just a bit, Jim?
this way?
Yeah. So we have, oh, it's in the other. So the Inspector of Animals. The other one is the dog officer and the other is the person who assists with rabies shots and does, they're so similar. They have crossover in their duties, but one is basically the dog officer, but has a different name. Officer control.
103 is dog officer. And then animal inspector's 142.
Yeah, and the okay. The Inspector of Animals is responsible for, like, if there's a rabies, somebody calls and says, oh, there's a skunk that has rabies, they will assist the person in processing, that the police would take care of most likely. But they help people who have problems with their animals. And then you have the dog officer who monitors the, all the dogs that are barking too much and breaking leash laws or biting.
And inspector of
our case-
animals is required. Isn't that a state requirement to have somebody in that position? And I
Which
think they
one,
also check out animal abuse from
Yep.
farms and stuff.
And they do they do the barn inspections and, make sure that we're not having bird flu outbreak with your chickens. So, and both positions are held by the same individual currently. Nancy Long is both our dog officer and the Inspector of Animals. They used to be those positions. We used to have a veterinarian that was the Inspector of Animals, but she has not been active for a few years.
Thank you.
I don't think,
Animal Control Officer, that's the dog officer. And it's confusing because they use the same, they sound the same.
I don't think there's any changes in the library from the last time we've reviewed this.
Nope,
Debt service,
nope. Because we clarified that even if we go out to borrow, the first loan won't be due until later on, but I'll just I want to verify that timing with Ryan to make sure that if we do want to go out for a ban, that we have money available.
okay. So that might be something that that might need to get plugged in here.
Yeah, but it sounded like if we could just go out for a longer term bond, we should be okay.
Mhm.
It's just depending on interest rates, you know, he might advise doing it the other way.
Okay. Miscellaneous. These are where all the big numbers are.
County retirement is a number that's provided to us from the FERCog.
I can't hear you, George.
The money, a dollar amount for retirement county is from FERCog.
Um, it's the county retirement. It's not for a cog. It's the Franklin County Retirement
Okay,
Board.
but that's a number that's given
And,
to
well,
us.
it comes in two pieces. We get the town portion, which is about 226,700, and then we have to add in the Union 28 portion.
But it's not a number that we have flexibility on. It's a number that's provided to us. It's a number that's provided to us.
Yeah.
And then the $5,000 for unemployment compensation, that goes into the unemployment fund.
Mm-hmm.
And there's actually more than $5,000 available if there were claims. Okay,
Yeah.
Want to be clear on that, that's all.
And that was a topic that potentially for discussion, if there needed to be, you know, I think, George, you kept arguing it should be funded through the budget, and whether it should be a free cash transfer or funded through the budget.
Right, but I just want to be clear that what we're requesting is $5,000 to go to the fund. And there's actually more money available than $5,000 if there is a layoff next year.
Well, that's why I'm trying to get you the balance of the,
I thought it was 13,000 in the back.
13,000, I think, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not interested in dollars. I'm just talking about concept. When we explain it to people on town floor, because somebody might say only 5,000. If you lay somebody off, that's not nearly enough. And I just want to be able to say, us to be able to say, this is really just going into a fund, and that fund could go down. We don't know how much, but we're just funding. We were done.
Jim, this may be the time for me to say, I would support, this is in the context of what George's remarks were earlier and what Becky told us about the taxes going up 0.79% this year. If we funded some of these items in miscellaneous from cash this year, we could level that out. We could make the taxes stay the same by my rough calculation. We could fund the OPEB from free cash for 1 year. We could also take out line number 178, because my recollection of the meeting we had last week with the treasurer was that we don't have to have that line in here because we're going to borrow money. That money, that loan will not require any payments by us till the next fiscal year. If we took that, and if the FinCom wants to recommend the $25,000 for the library building fund, I don't see any reason why it shouldn't come out of reserves instead of out of our budget this year. Take those three items, put them together, and we can give the taxpayers a break for this COVID year. I think we
haven't finished going through the expenses yet, Bob. Yeah, okay, those are the things.
We are going through the
We go through the expenses. We're not done. I had questions about a few more lines, and then we could talk about those things.
Jim just said miscellaneous, so that's why I brought them up.
I know, but that's,
Yeah,
we said the cash thing and, making the soft landing from 220 to something else was a conversation we have after we went through all the lines, and we're not there.
Yeah, Bob, when I brought up miscellaneous, that means we're looking through these numbers right now and see if we have any
In the
questions.
miscellaneous section.
We're not really talking yet about how we fund this.
We're almost there, Bob. We're very close.
So close.
I did want to point out though, why we were talking about the budgets. I read the Gazette every day, and I've been reading about the town meetings in all the different towns. I always read the articles. Plainfield and Williamsburg and Hadley's not like us, of course. And there was a number of others. Pelham, Leverett, their town meetings were documented and what they did. And I just wanted to point out to everybody, I hope you're all reading the same thing, because it gives you a perspective on what the other towns are doing and what their practices are. It doesn't mean we have to do what they do. I'm not suggesting that we follow blindly, but I did notice quite a number of towns putting very large amounts towards OPEB, much larger than our 50. Leverett or Pelham in particular was like 3 times as much. I'm not saying we need to do that, but I am saying all the towns around us are taking it very serious. And this is not the cash question. This is just reminding everyone that I really think it's important that we continue to provide funds to OPEB. I think the 50 might be low, but we talked about waiting for the actuary. But in general, I think it's really helpful to read those articles in the Gazette and see what the other towns are doing, or go to their websites and read their budgets.
Yeah. I think the key word there, George, was we did talk about this, and we did say we want to wait until the actuary and go through that analysis
Yes.
before we make any significant changes in any direction with
Yes.
regard to the OPEB. But looking at this list here of miscellaneous, is there any other items or line items here? Melody?
Yeah, line number 174, and maybe we addressed this, but can someone remind me why that's 0?
Because the projects that we know about have not been, there's still open projects, and there's, I think, $20,000 in a fund to
21,000.
handle them. Is that right, Bob?
Yeah, I think we're, Melody, I'm in the building committee. I think we're okay this year. We could ask for more if we need it. But I'm comfortable with that because we do have a reserve. And I don't anticipate we'll need more, but if we do, we'll come to you. We'll come to me.
Anything else on the, Susie?
Another rationale for that is that we will continue to have buildings and they'll continue to need to be repaired. So I'm understanding this to be, well, we have a different account that's accumulated this money versus seeing it as an operating expense. And I'm trying to remember if there's another place in the budget where the repair of buildings is viewed as a regular operating expense.
On town buildings, it
And
is.
there's a $10,000 line
Okay, where is that?
in general government, I think.
Okay, so
Building repairs, it's $9,451.
buildings repair. Total buildings.
It's
Line.
near the end of general government.
So that's what I'm just making sure, that we have a regular fund because we have regular buildings that need regular repair, and that's some line here. I don't see it though. 10,000. Nope.
I'm sorry, I'm looking in the expense. The expense report, not on the budget. I'll find it for you, Susie. Sorry.
Is it? Oh, it's repairs. It's line 67.
57, yeah.
67. Okay, so that partly answers Melody's question. Where is that being funded? And it is in the operating budget.
Right. And Susie, just so you understand it, my experience has been that a lot of times when some project comes up for town, a maintenance or repair of a town building, then we go through capital planning and we get an appropriation for that project, such as painting town hall or placing a window or doors or so that's how a lot of those expenses are dealt with. So this is more miscellaneous repairs that come up, not planned repairs we will make capital appropriations for.
Yeah, it's more like when the sewer line backs up, or the window's broken, or smaller things, and usually not, there are things required that don't always need the building committee.
Okay. We're looking at a 6.628523 operating budget. We've gone through it all. do we expect, Becky, at this point, anything else that could come along of significance in the coming weeks?
I don't think so. But I'm going back to everything double checking. So if I come across something, I'll let you know immediately. But
So given where we are right now, is this something that we want to talk about, we as a finance committee supporting this budget?
Well, can we talk about Bob's, the
yeah, I think you need to
conversation
have
about-
Bob's conversation first.
Yeah,
Okay,
because there's a
now-
number of different ways to do it.
Well,
There's
actually,
two things. Is one is supporting the actual operating expenses.
right.
Oh, okay.
And it's another thing to figure out how do we fund those expenses?
Well,
Right, you're right. I apologize.
no, but I would like to, if I may,
Your voice is breaking up.
I'm sorry about that. One of the things I was considering was actually decreasing to some extent the operating budget. It's just an idea.
We didn't hear what it was.
I
What's your
understand.
idea?
So in fiscal, first of all, earlier when I said, when we get to this, one of the things we need to figure out is how much money are we talking about? So for instance, last year we funded $220,000 worth of the operating budget with free cash. And we don't want all of that to go back into the budget this year because people would take a hit. Am I correct in saying that? Does everybody agree with that
No,
statement?
I don't agree with that. I think
Okay.
we have, I feel like there's another process to do, which is to identify, first to say, yes, this is a budget I support. Then where can we plug in free cash? And there's categories, and one you're saying is to soften the blow. That could be one of the categories, but there's other ways of looking at a policy for free cash.
Well, yes. What I was thinking, let me just throw it out and then everybody can proceed. Of course, you can proceed however you want, but I think free cash is getting pretty low. And I'm a little concerned about the balance it's going to be at. And I think our stabilization accounts are really strong. And there's been this debate about debt service and stabilization, line 178. And I'm actually thinking maybe to some extent we can just decrease line 178. And because it's going away in fiscal 23, we're not going to fund line 178 in fiscal 23 because the debt service is going to kick in for the culvert. So I'm thinking, why don't we reduce that 112, 695 to a lower number? I'm not saying eliminate it, but decrease it to a lower number. That provides relief to the taxpayers without hurting the free cash balance. Because right now, I did the calculations. I made myself a spreadsheet. And I'm looking at what our balances will be on July 1st after the new fiscal year starts and all the transfers and the funds, let's assume the funds were expended on the fixed assets. Our free cash goes down to $728,000. Our stabilization is going to be over $1 million, the two stabilizations combined. So I'm feeling like, do we want to lower free cash? Or do we want to maybe increase stabilization by less? And I'm thinking that might be better. This is just one person's opinion. And so I wanted to throw that out as a concept.
I think one thing to keep in mind, George, is, yeah, stabilization, both stabilization accounts do move up. But some of that movement, I think we envisioned or anticipation of some very significant capital over the next 2 years, whether it be 22 and 23.
Yes. And I would say
So-
over the next 5 years, because when we have that
Yeah.
debt service on the culvert, the only way we're going to be able to fund capital projects is cash for the most part. So it is important that we keep those high. I won't argue that.
Is this the
Well,
time?
it's not a question of keeping them high, that they might be high right now in anticipation of a couple of really strong capital years coming up. They're not going to stay high.
Right, right. That $1 million, we're going to be just over $1 million on our stabilization accounts. And we're looking at 700,000 potentially for the second roof job at the elementary school. So we are really looking at draining cash in a big way. over the course of the next 2 to 3 years.
I think it was Bob had his hand up and then Susie.
I guess we're having the discussion about free cash that I was told we weren't going to have, but we're having it now, right? Because that's what seems to me. Anyway,
Yes,
think
yes, that's right, Bob.
our free cash is higher, much higher than it should be. I don't really go for this Joe Markarian guideline of 10%. I don't support that. I am on the finance committee. I have my own judgment about what cash should be. And I think that we should be putting the free cash, in my understanding from reading about it extensively in DOR recommendations, should be 3 to 5%. I think we have way in excess of that. We should be transferring that money, applying some of it to our budget this year, to make George's point. That 112 should be coming out of the budget. We went through that with Ryan last week. And we should be funding big projects through a 2/3 supermajority vote. That's the way our financial system is set up. Free cash is not supposed to be the way that big projects are funded. We should not allow someone to come forward with a vote for a major project and then have it go through at 50% plus one vote at town meeting. That's wrong. It should have a consensus of opinions, therefore it should be subjected to the rules that control reserve accounts. So I'd like to see those reserve accounts grow further. I'd like to see us use those reserve accounts for what they were designed for, which is capital projects, such as the culvert and the school roof and other things that are coming down the road. But I certainly don't support keeping our free cash in excess of $700,000.
Okay, so we're moving from the budget discussion and getting into a cash.
Okay, well, I'd like to apply some of that free cash to the budget this year.
All right, so do we want to agree on where we are with regard to the budget first? Do we have a common understanding as a committee on this budget? And do we want to, Susie?
So what George was saying is, no, he doesn't, at this point, he's proposing that he doesn't agree with the bottom line of this budget because he's looking at line 178 and wondering if that number should be changed. That's the first conversation we're having.
Yeah.
I disagree.
The
I
other
would rather-
And we really can't have that discussion without having an overall general free cash.
Yeah.
Is what you're saying. Yeah.
Okay, what about
Yeah.
line number 173, the library building fund? I personally think that if that money is going to be going into that fund, it should not be in the budget. It should be coming out of a transfer from reserves, because it's another reserve account. It's just a matter of taking some money out of one reserve account, putting it into another. It shouldn't be coming out of the levy. I think that item could be taken out of this budget. And even if you support putting money into that fund, I think you could support, it makes sense to me to take it out of a reserve account rather than out of the
Yeah.
levy.
Yeah. Go ahead, Susie.
So I have a rationale. I would like to look at a rationale for how to use free cash, which is also recommended in both the state guide and the guide that the town approved, and which was, you don't use free cash for reoccurring expenses. You use them for expenses that are not going to reoccur. The library saving account is only to save up for a new library building. I believe we could fund that from free cash because it is not an operating expense of a new library. It's saving up for a library. So I see the rationale of not a reoccurring expense, something that will drop out of the budget, would apply for the new library. It might also apply for the assistant tax collector, because at some point, we're probably not going to have 2 tax collectors. We're going to have 1. But in the meantime, while we're waiting for this position to be filled, I see that as an expense that will drop out. But I do not support putting free cash into expenses like OPEB that will reoccur, because we will have that debt, we will have that liability to pay off. So if we keep it in the operating budget, we're prepared to meet that, which we may be underprepared at this point, but it is not a free cash, non-reoccurring expense. It's a reoccurring expense. So I want to go with a rationale, and I think it's much easier to explain things to town meeting and show that we have a reasonable understanding of how to be fiscally responsible by using policies, and they are policies that, whether Bob disagrees or not, they are policies that the select board voted in 2018. And the town chose to have that workshop. They used a grant to have that workshop with Joe Markarian, and he was a professional person that reflects a bigger experience than just our volunteers.
So last year,
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I apologize.
no, I was just gonna say, I'm with you, Susie, for the most part. I think that's really anything that's recurring, any recurring expenses in the budget don't, in my mind, really qualify as something for free cash, or place an allocation for free cash. I guess the library is a little bit more complicated in my mind, in that it's been recurring for 10 years. $25,000 a year for 10 years, and that could go on into the future. However, it also is a capital. It ultimately is going towards capital. So that the library one is for me a little bit more complicated. George.
So what Susie's describing is sound policy. There's no question about it. But we did last year fund 220,000 of the budget with no specific earmarks for that money. We were just doing that. Now we're in a position where, that most of that is coming back into the budget if we don't do something. I do want to point out that we had $65,000 more in regional school expense last year than we have now. $65,000 has fallen out of the budget. So the 220 that we funded with cash last year, 65 of it, we no longer need the fund. So in my mind, at this point, we really have $155,000 now falling on property taxes that did not last year. And if we follow the concept of what I refer to as a soft landing, where we take the 220 and we say 110 one year, we only let 110 fall into fiscal 22 revenue, and then the rest of it into fiscal 23, minus the 65, we're at 155. So 110 falling back into the budget this year, we're missing it by 45,000. So 220 last year, minus the 65, we're at 155 is falling back in the budget. If we can fund $45,000 of the operating budget, then I think we're halfway there. 25,000 makes sense. The 2,200 for the assistant taxes makes sense. And then further anticipated decrease in the regional assessment might be another 25,000, 20,000. So, I don't know that we can use these as rationale and things that we think are what cover this free cash transfer, which only needs to be $45,000 in my mind to get us at the halfway point. Those are the points I wanted to make.
Don't forget line 178, George. It's another place to get some relief.
I'm not going to budge on that, Bob. That goes away next year, just like the policy was all along. I personally would not budge on. I would not drop that. I would not drop that.
You're the same guy that just said you were going to drop it considerably about 5 minutes ago, right?
I said that I would drop it somewhat for this purpose if we didn't make a free cash transfer. For me personally, I'm looking for $45,000 to help. I think we only need to come up with $45,000 help here. I think we either need 45,000 in revenue, whether it's free cash or not, or we need to decrease expenses by 45. I was suggesting we decrease the 112.9, whatever that line is, by $45,000. That's all I was suggesting.
Okay, well, that's why.
That was the concept. I presented it as a concept, Bob. I didn't give
Okay,
specific.
but I'm just reminding you that because you said
I understand. No, I know. I want to be clear.
Becky, and then Susie.
Okay, just a couple of things, George. The balances I show for free cash with all the decisions made a week ago, I show a $728,000 balance in free cash.
Yeah, 728, 767.
Okay. And the balance I see in the stabilization accounts is 926,985. You said it was over $1 million.
Well, that would be with, so, what's that number, Becky?
926,985.70.
That's the total for both?
Did you add the 695 to that?
Did I add what?
The 695?
What 695?
Oh, I'm sorry, 112,695 transfer from the operating budget. Brings it to 1,039,680.
Oh, we haven't done that.
Well, right, if this budget is approved as is, that's what happened. That's all I'm saying. So I'm assuming it passes. I
Okay,
realize it's an open item.
it's an open item. And my other question is, so if you take 45,000 out of the 112 this year, you don't have enough to pay the debt on the 500,000 next year. It's going to take all of the 112 or more.
Yeah, I think 113,750. Yeah, I mean, right, it's gonna be about a $10,000 addition. It might be $10,000.
So then we have to build another $45,000 back into the budget to service the debt on the culvert next year.
Well, again, we're doing something to provide relief. So we know that next year, taxpayers are gonna have to pick up another 110,000, the other half of the 20. So we know that there's gonna be an increase anyways.
That's a discussion we had a year ago, George, when we decided to allocate free cash to the budget. We had that discussion a year ago, that we're gonna have to talk
George
about.
wasn't here.
I wasn't on the FinCom, but what was that discussion? What
Basically what you're
specifically did you
saying.
decide?
It's just you're going to have to add it back. And
Right.
if you're attempting to keep the tax rate low, and we're going to, hopefully the total values will increase, but you're still going to be closer to the 25 mark. So whatever you have to build back in, and if you don't get any relief from the regional school, which you might not, in fact, it could go the other direction next year because it's being opened up.
I don't think we should assume any additional relief. I mean, that's totally speculative, and that would be news to other towns for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Susie,
The other thing is that we're not alone in this, and the federal government just gave relief to taxpayers, not all taxpayers, but most of them. And so I'm not feeling that the town of Shutesbury needs to be more active in giving relief. I feel like we need to have a coherent philosophy. And last year I understood why the town decided to put in free cash in June, because what kind of relief was on the horizon. But we did have 2 relief packages coming from our taxes that are in the federal government. So I would like to stick with a local perspective of a rational use of free cash. And I don't agree that we should change down our capital stabilization allocation of 112,000 because that is a reoccurring fund to keep us in solvent as we take on capital projects, which are inevitable. And we don't always get good support from the state or federals for our capital projects. That's why we're having to fix the first part of the roof ourselves. So let's keep ourselves solvent and rely on the relief part from the federal government.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Bob.
I disagree completely with Susie on this. I think we have an obligation we represent our taxpayers in our town meeting here. And I think we were wise, and it was reasonable for us last year to dedicate a good chunk of free cash to the budget. And I think we could soften the blow, the transition to the fully funded budget, by some measures that we've all discussed here. I've proposed a couple. As far as the line 178 goes, we hashed this out last week with Ryan. he said, you don't have to keep that in there. You don't have to fund that this year. That's going to be going back in the budget next year as the duty of the service on the loan. We've agreed to borrow $500,000 to fund the culvert. That won't come on our books till fiscal year 23. So yeah, it'll be reflected in our taxes next year. But this line 112,695 would go into stabilization this year, and stabilization accounts are close to $1 million right now. So I think that'd be one place where we could provide the relief of the levy. And I think the other ideas that I had, I hope the finance committee would also support. That is the 25,000 and the OPEB are things that are basically reserve accounts, and they could be funded for 1 year from reserves instead of from the tax base. So again, if we fund all those three things, then we're going to have zero tax increase this year, zero, which I think would be nice.
Becky and then George.
Oh, I was just gonna say that Ryan started out saying that the 112 wasn't necessary, but at the end of the conversation, he said that you have to have a plan to fund your debt. And that when he recognized that that's how we fund our debt, he supported keeping it.
Yeah, and also he wasn't fully aware of our capital needs, right? I mean, that was,
Right.
that became clear that we are looking at a sort of set of commitments that are beyond what he understood coming into that meeting.
Yeah, closer to, they're over 2 million instead of 1 million.
George.
So I'm not going to be a broken record on this. This is a policy that we've been covering forever. We have the debt service built into this budget. This adjusts as the debt comes in. That's guaranteed. I think it's important to put another $113,000 into capital stabilization accounts, into stabilization accounts. That brings them up to $1,039,000. We have a potentially $700,000 roof. Take that away, and we're left with $300,000. No debt capacity in the budget. And so how are we going to pay for all the capital items that are going to come up in the next 5 years? Because capital items come up every year. There's always some. Some years are smaller than others. Susie did the legwork and told us it's been averaging $100,000 a year. When I read the Gazette and I read all these towns and what they did, they're all buying capital something. Everybody is buying something. Leverett paid over I think it was $230,000 for a highway truck. Pelham for something, I can't remember what it was. And we will always have something. The concept that we won't have these CapEx year after year is just not accurate. And we're going to need a big stabilization fund to get us through the next 5 to 6 years.
Susie.
I would like to suggest that we take some steps now, because I don't think the point of this is to change people's opinion. I think people have expressed their opinions. And so I'd like to first vote on, do we accept this bottom line expenses? And then we can vote on transfer of using free cash for whatever proposal somebody wants to make. But it's really, we've gone through this enough, so I think we know where we stand.
Do you want to make a motion, Susie?
Yeah, I make a motion that we accept the operating expenses for FY '22 at $6,628,523.
What was that, George?
Maybe adjusted slightly for the ComCon thing that we looked at, the $7,500 being shifted to another line. But how about no more than 6,628,523?
Sure.
Yeah. Any further discussion? Okay, we can vote.
Arvanitis, aye.
I'm going to abstain on this until I get more information about how we're going to fund these items. Abstain. Groves.
Hemingway, I'll also abstain.
Cashew, aye.
Mosier, aye.
Walton, aye.
All right, so passes 5-0, is that right? Yep.
And 2 extensions. Okay, do we want to open it up to, how do we want to, the cash discussion and how we want,
I'm ready to make a motion for the free cash discussion. I make a motion that we use 2 numbers together. No, it's 3 numbers together. So I make a motion that we use free cash to fund the library building saving fund, the assistant treasurer, and the tax collector. I can put the amounts in. It's 25,000 for the library building project, 1,200 for the assistant treasurer, and 4,400 for the assistant tax collector. That's a motion.
You said 4,200?
4,400.
400.
So
so
for a
about,
grand total of
just 30,600 total?
Probably. I didn't add
20, wait,
I got
25,000?
30,600.
25.
Say that, Becky, again?
30,600.
Oh, we got the same number. It's got to be
Okay.
wrong.
so could you repeat those 3 numbers then? The
Yep.
25?
It's 25,000 for the library. It's 1,200 for assistant treasurer, and it's 4,400 for assistant tax collector, totaling 30,600 to come from free cash. Is there a second?
I'll second it. George?
Becky, you had told us that the tax rate would be $23.50. That number will decrease if we make this transfer.
By,
30 cents? Becky, do you know?
Oh, will it be? I don't know. I think it'll be lower.
I'm gonna pull up the
Sorry,
tax-
I'll do it.
I'll pull
I
up the
didn't,
tax
I didn't
rate.
look to see if those numbers changed with, with the friggin' COLA.
Well, the-
maybe slightly.
Yeah, maybe slightly.
It won't be much.
Yeah, close enough for
Yeah.
government
good.
work.
Good. 10.
But the concept here is to isolate free cash to non-recurring items. That's,
Yeah.
that's
Mhm.
that's the message here. is to focus on
Exactly.
the Non-recurring items.
Actually, I think it's a 14-cent decrease, Becky. So I think it goes to 23.36. I could be wrong.
I have to round it more. 13. I got a 13 cent.
Yeah, I'm using the old assessment. I'm using current year's assessment.
Yeah.
Assessed values. Okay.
Melody?
That precedent become policy then, that every year we would just keep it to non-recurring items? Or is that just for, I mean, I know we can't vote for ensuing years, but I'm just curious if this precedent is kind of a glide path to policy.
It's
I guess the point is it already is the policy, right? We just have.
it is state guidelines, it is state policy, it's the state direction is a budget should, anything that's recurring, any recurring expenses should be part of a budget as opposed to funding by free cash or other means.
No, but I mean, moving free cash only to non-recurring as opposed to also funding recurring. Maybe it's a stupid question. Sorry, I withdraw.
No, I think it's a really key question, Melody. It's really important that once if you really viewed all the items as recurring, it's just like putting what we did last year, putting the 220,000 in the budget. It's, your budget, how are you going to fund it next year? If you reduce the tax rate, you have to make the tax rate go back up if these things really are reoccurring. So they do advise not to do it for reoccurring things, but it happens all the time.
Well, So the policy book on page 10 has two parts to that. To restrict the use of free cash to the extent possible and practical to one-time expenditures and to build or replenish the town stabilization funds. And then to refrain under normal circumstances, the use of free cash to fund the operating budget or other reoccurring expenditures. We agree that a pandemic is not a normal circumstance. So sometimes things happen, but we can also work towards meeting those goals. And it's not only in our town policy, you can read about it in the handbook for the state because you can dig yourself a hole. And yes, we did it last year and we're trying to back away from the edge there.
Thank
I think
you.
we should vote on these items. Is that okay?
You want to vote on the motion, Bob? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yes. I
Well,
would.
is there any further discussion? Is any other? Then we're good to vote.
So,
Do you want to, are we all clear on the motion?
You want me to read it?
Could,
Yes.
Yeah, maybe read it, AJ.
Okay, so, Susie, feel free to, because I said, Susie Mosier made a motion that we use free cash to fund the following expenses in the FY22 budget. New library fund, $25,000, assistant treasurer at $1,200, and tax collector, $4,400.
It's the
Totaling,
Assistant tax collector.
assistant tax
Okay.
collector.
and assistant tax collector, $4,400, totaling $30,600.
Yeah.
Seconded by Jim Walton.
I have a problem.
Okay, Becky.
What's that, Maggie?
Okay, so, and I failed to bring this up, I apologize, but I reduced the assistant tax collector to $2,200, thinking that we could carry forward this year's, because when we actually get somebody, this was never enough for a whole year. So what's in the budget is $2,200.
Okay.
Actually, I see, looks like 1,200 is in the budget.
That's the assistant
treasurer.
treasurer.
Oh, I'm sorry, assistant tax collector is 2,200?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the assistant treasurer is actually 1,210.
Right.
Okay.
1,210.
Okay, we're gonna fix all that. And
Okay.
collector, yep, 200, yep.
All right, so we got to change this.
All
So
right,
it's 2,200.
That's 28,400.
28,410.
210 and
28,400.
I think 410 because the assistant treasurer was 1210.
yeah. So 28,410.
So essentially, this is a motion to transfer $28,410 from free cash to revenue to fund the operating budget, and it's made up of these three items at these $3 amounts. That's what we're.
Yeah, and it will reduce your free cash to 700,000 even, pretty much.
What's the impact on the tax?
Probably 11 cents. Oh,
Yeah, 700, 357, Becky. Yeah.
Okay, do we want to vote? We'll try that again.
Arvanitis.
I'm sorry, George. Oh,
How's it go?
okay.
Arvanitis, aye.
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, aye.
Ashu, aye.
What was your eye?
Walton, aye.
the
Becky?
tax impact dropped to 12 cents.
Okay, so 2338.
Bob, you had your hand up.
I just think that that's good, but I'd like to make a motion that we take further steps, that is, eliminate a line or zero out the line 178 and If anybody wants to second that motion, I would appreciate having a vote on that.
I second the motion.
Further discussion?
Motion again?
I think he's asking what the motion, AJ, do you want to read the motion?
Yeah, so let me make sure I understood it. So Bob, the motion is that we zero out the transfer to capital stabilization line.
Yes.
But we already approved the budget, I thought.
And not from free cash. You're just saying zero.
I'm saying zero it out.
You're saying in the operating
I
budget,
can't hear you, George. Sorry.
in the operating budget, we just all approved 6,628,523. Are you saying you want to lower that?
Yeah, I abstained from that vote, but yes, I want to eliminate this. I've said this all along. I don't see why we should fund this line this year.
Well, I'm just saying we already approved the expenses as a part, as a finance committee. 5 people out of 7 approved. the
Okay,
six-
well, the option for me then is to bring this up at town meeting, which I will be happy to do. But I thought that I want to see the committee vote on this, but I don't know when the,
I'm asking if we can. It didn't seem to me like we can do that because we already closed the door on this budget. Yes, we can do it on town floor. I understand what you're saying because we can adjust the budget on town floor, but I thought that we couldn't go back to this because we agreed to a number.
okay, well, that's why I abstained, because I wasn't clear on that. I was agreeing to that number. So that was my logic for bringing this forward. But whatever the process the committee thinks is right for me.
Well, but wouldn't the point be that if any of the 5 people who voted to approve the expense budget voted yes on your motion, Bob, that essentially means they changed their mind, right? And so I suppose that would update their vote on the prior motion.
Yeah. I guess I'm a little, there's a guy who used to work for me, invented a word called frustrated. A little frustrated because I wanted to bring this up all year and I'm trying to bring it before the committee now. And I feel like I'm being kind of, it's like catch 22, you know?
George,
I'm not opposed to us voting on this motion. But
Well, the motion's out there. We have to vote on it. But Bob, we've talked about this ad nauseam. We've been talking about this for years. Jeff Lacy, we debated it with Jeff Lacy 2 meetings ago or 3 meetings ago. We have been talking about this. This gets talked about all the time.
But we have not voted on it, George.
Yeah.
We
Let's
voted on the
just vote on
budget.
it. Let's
Let's
just vote
vote on it.
separate.
Okay, let's vote on it. Yeah.
Let's vote on it.
so we need a second first. I don't think I
We
heard.
have a second.
We have a
Susan
second.
seconded.
Susie seconded.
Who
Yeah,
seconded?
we did.
Susie,
are we good to vote?
Carbonitis day.
Groves, aye?
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, no.
Mosher, no.
Walton, no.
So was that 3 yes votes and 4 no's? Is that what
Correct.
everybody else got?
Correct.
Okay.
Any other thoughts on the budget and possible new means of funding via free cash of some elements here that we maybe missed? Bob,
I'd like to make a motion that we fund the OPEB contribution this year from free cash.
is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? We've had quite a bit of discussion on this, so I think we're ready to vote.
Carbonitis day.
Ready?
Okay. I think George voted nay.
Did he? I don't hear him. No, I can't hear him anymore. Charity is.
What's going on?
Aye.
Groves, aye?
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, no.
Mosher, no.
Walton, no.
Okay, so those were identical votes. So motion fails 3-4.
Bob,
Swear to invoke the 3-hour mercy rule.
Bob, I think you contributed, you were a pretty significant contributor to these
Doesn't mean I can't offer the 3-hour mercy rule.
3
though.
hours.
The Celtics and the Bruins aren't playing tonight, Bob.
Huh?
The Celtics and the Bruins aren't playing tonight, Bob.
Thank God the Celtics aren't playing.
They are
Yeah,
playing.
good
They're
point.
playing Cleveland tonight.
That's right.
Oh,
they
that's
are.
right.
Yeah.
I just dropped that out of my mind.
What time?
Oh, my God. They're awful.
It's all your fault, Bob, where we are here.
You're right. It's all my fault.
What's, what's the warrant article prep agenda item mean?
That's where you have to. Okay, you have to give me a bottom line so I can get it in the warrant. And then at your next meeting, you get to go through all the money articles in the warrant and approve them.
Okay.
When is our next meeting?
So
Next Tuesday in 6 days?
And what time are you meeting? Is that, because the select board meets at the same time?
On next Tuesday?
Yep. And the budget's supposed to be final. So you have a final budget, right?
we do.
You're amazing. I just hate to miss all the fun of being at one of your other 3-hour meetings.
But isn't that the meeting where we just go, article number 1, FinCom supports
Yeah.
it? But will we have that document from the select board by then?
It would be preferable if you could
Maybe
meet
on
the day
Wednesday,
before.
if we meet before?
Yeah, because I'm hoping they can vote a final.
Becky,
They
Or
need to be
maybe
the
I can
last vote.
change them to the 20th. Yes, Jim?
is the MLP warrant article, have you installed that in the list of warrant articles?
It's in the list of articles with a question to Steve Schmidt. Because I realized that the MLP manager did not get her salary increase last year.
No, I'm not talking about that one. I'm talking about the retained earnings and being able to transfer the retained earnings to service the debt this coming August. That's in there? Okay, I just want to be sure.
Thank you, send it
Yep.
to us. You should have an email with it.
And the retained earnings, I have a confirmed amount from the state, so
Good,
that's
Good,
what I used.
okay.
Susie and then Bob.
Okay.
So in terms of sequence, I'd be happy if you just told me what to do. When should we meet? And in the sequence of what the select board needs to do and what we need to do.
Is there any possibility of meeting on, well, the capital planning meeting's Monday, right, Bob?
Yeah.
At 6?
Yes.
Could the finance committee meet at 7?
On Monday,
Uh-huh.
this coming Monday?
And then you get Tuesday off.
Oh,
I'm not sure if I'll be able to, I'm going to be on the vineyards starting on Saturday. Then I thought I would be able to meet the capital planning with my iPad, but I'm not sure that I can attend a meeting on Monday, but sure that I'll be missed. But, and I definitely cannot meet on Tuesday because I'll be on the road on a 6 o'clock boat. So I'll be driving home for four hours from 6 to 10 or something. So I'll be out of action the rest of the week till Friday. So that's me.
Would Tuesday afternoon work?
Could you all, Melody, could you do a Tuesday afternoon?
I can't.
AJ can't. Okay.
One option, Becky, would be capital planning meets from 5:30 to 6:30.
Yeah.
So if we met on Monday, but I don't know if this works for you, Bob, but then if we met, I have something at 8 o'clock Monday night, so I'm just wondering if we met at 6, from 6:30 to 8. I don't know if that's enough time.
It should be plenty of time, because like Susie said, it's, you know,
Yeah.
trying to think of, I think most of the money articles are, you've generated. And, you know, like the library is going to now be a free cash transfer.
Right.
Trying to think if there's anything that's controversial. I don't think so.
What,
So I can only meet till 7:30. I have a hard stop at 7:30.
On Monday? You think an hour would be enough time, Becky? Just,
I think it should be, yeah. From 6:30 to 7:30.
yeah.
So are we scheduled 5:30? Or we're gonna have to change the schedule in capital planning, right?
Bob, I thought we were at 5:30.
Okay, well, maybe I'm mistaken about that.
Let me double
What
check.
did you think it was, 6, Bob?
I thought it was, but I was relying on my memory, which is not always perfect.
that's always.
Well, when you-
frustrating.
I try not to do that.
8 or 9 meetings that are all within, yeah, it gets confusing.
Okay, so we're looking at,
That's what's on my personal calendar, and I think I would have put it there when we actually were meeting last time, so.
Okay,
Let's see here. It says here,
Not-
Monday. Doesn't have it,
Not on the calendar yet.
not on the calendar yet. So I guess it's
it can
somewhat.
be whatever we want it to be.
Yeah.
Would it, if it was 5, would it be easier for capital planning people? Bob and AJ?
5 should work for me on Monday.
Either would be okay for me.
So if we did 5 for capital planning and 6 for FinCom, and then you'd have more leeway in case
Yeah,
things,
that sounds like that'd work better for me.
is that good, Melody?
Mm.
Okay, great.
okay, so we're looking at 6 on Monday for FinCom.
Yeah.
And our agenda for that meeting?
To review the warrant and vote on warrant money issues. What you're doing is saying whether the finance committee recommends or does not recommend all financial articles.
So do we do a vote on each one? I'm trying to remember.
Mhm. Yeah. Susan?
Okay, so that you'll have some, Becky, you'll have something in advance prepared? Okay,
So you'll email us the draft warrant and then we'll know what we're dealing with when we get there.
Right, because Paul Lyons, the moderator, likes to order them the way he wants to see them happen. And so I have to get it to him first, hopefully on Friday, and then he'll reorder it. And when I get it back from, well, he'll tell me how to order it. I'll redo it and then I'll send out to you guys in the select board.
Becky, just for your information, on my calendar, I had 5 o'clock for capital planning on Monday.
Perfect.
So
There you go.
AJ would have been late.
So we have the night off on Tuesday now then, right? So-
Yes, everybody's, phew.
I scratched it.
But don't forget, annual town meeting is June 12th. And are you guys going to do a hearing? Not a hearing. Are you going to do an info
Information.
session?
That worked well last year.
I think
we did talk about doing one, I thought it was June 1st.
Yes,
All
that's
right,
what I have.
I think we penciled in June 1st for an info.
Beautiful. That's great.
yeah.
And I think we talked about, maybe Becky, you've talked with Paul about maybe moderating that also. Is that how we've done that in the past?
He did do it last year.
Yeah,
Yeah, and there was a lot of people with a lot of questions.
yeah.
I can't make the June 1st meeting.
It's okay.
Oh,
Susie,
And
Sorry.
Jim and I are working on the draft of the annual town report, and I wonder, Jim, if we should try to get it, the draft out so people can approve it at Monday's meeting. Because it's not it's only a draft. They have to. see.
yeah, you've scheduled tomorrow at 3,
Mhm.
yeah, for us to review that, and anybody else that's available is welcome to join.
Yeah, we're still.
Or our second, that is our second meeting, and
Yeah.
hopefully we can wrap up a lot of that, and then do we want to send something, we can send something out after that meeting to the finance committee to take a look at in advance of Monday's meeting?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. George,
Susie, you want, Jim and Susie, you want I saw my name in an email. You were wanting me to put together a graph.
Oh, yeah.
The budget by the high level categories, government.
Yeah.
Fire, police, schools.
We saw a nice
And-
one in 2020, I think. Last
Yeah.
year was.
Maybe the last one you did, George.
Yeah, I think.
I think I
actually,
did last year's.
I think we did do last year, or Wheezy or somebody did it last year.
Yeah.
I saw it.
There's a
I
difference.
think I did it.
There's a difference
Oh,
between
okay.
last year and 2 years ago. We kind of like the one 2 years ago.
Oh, well, you might need to, if you've got it, if you could email it to me,
I will.
I'll do that.
Yeah, I will. I'll show it to you.
The tricky part about that is the category breakdown, because there are a lot of all right, send me that and I will make it like that one.
Great. We will.
And I'll try and turn it around before the weekend or on the weekend. And Becky, when did you think will you be able to send us drafts of the warrant articles before Monday?
Probably on Sunday.
Yeah, that'd be great. Anytime before 6 o'clock, so we could have a chance. I'd like to look through it before then.
Yeah.
And then, would you also expect at that point in time, you'd also have the budget updated, the 1.75 and the bonus?
Yeah, an updated, yeah, that would be nice to get that based on our discussion tonight, the updates
Oh.
tonight.
So I was unclear on that. Do I add a bonus line?
Separate bonus line, and let's put it under miscellaneous. Where are we going to put it?
And the other thing I had emailed, while you had your discussion, I emailed our accountant to make sure it's legal for us to do that.
Good idea.
Because I think the concept of bonuses usually isn't a municipal concept, so I'll double check that.
Might have to call it something else.
COVID relief.
Um,
No.
Fish dinner.
6-pack.
6-pack and some chips.
Dinner.
Focus.
Melody, I just wanted you to know, the select board appointed you to the work study committee last night. So, yeah, so you just want to get sworn in by the town clerk.
Oh, do I need to get sworn in? Huh.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Given that we're already volunteers?
It's too late at night, Melody. I think, yeah, I'll double check on that too.
Okay.
I think that it's different than just participate. Yeah, because you're a representative. You're right. You've been elected to represent. You're right. Forget it. Thank you.
I make a motion, we get
Yeah,
out.
I just one last quick item. Any quick committee reports that people want to get out there before we close up, that it's important to be heard by the committee, whether it's school or
I haven't had the school one yet.
personnel board or capital or.
Capital will meet Monday. We'll report back to FinCom, right, AJ?
Yep.
Becky, I've got some things I want to discuss with you, but I'll not subject these other people to it.
Any other committee reports, or are we good?
Good.
All right. Somebody wanted to make a motion.
I'll make it.
I'll second it.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
George,
We're done.
Celtics, against the Celtics, spoil the Bruins.
Oh, man, yeah, the Bruins.
What's the Celtics doing?
Celtics are awful. The Bruins are great.
Yeah, Bruins have a chance to go far.
They do. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
See
Love you.
you all on Monday.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. This was you did a great job, guys. This was a hard one. Thank you.
Thank you.